The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. The Federation has charted thousands of star systems, catalogued countless phenomena, and reduced the cosmos to elegant equations. But what happens when something defies every sensor, every theory, every rational explanation? What happens when warriors from another Earth, heroes who've battled gods and conquered alien invasions, collide with a civilization that has rejected warfare as the solution to conflict? The USS Enterprise D was conducting a routine survey of the Kalra Expanse, a region of space where subspace instabilities had recently been detected. Captain Jean-Luc Picard stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the main viewscreen display swirling clouds of ionized gas and gravitational distortions. It was beautiful in its chaos, a reminder that the universe still held mysteries even for the Federation's flagship. "Captain, I'm detecting an unusual energy signature," Lieutenant Commander Data announced from his station at Ops, his golden eyes reflecting the console's glow. "It does not match any known subspace phenomenon in our database. Can you identify the source?" Picard asked, stepping closer to the android officer. "Negative, sir. The energy readings are inconsistent with established physics. I am detecting what appears to be quantum entanglement on a macroscopic scale, temporal displacement markers, and dimensional variance indicators simultaneously." Counselor Deanna Troi leaned forward in her seat, her expression troubled. "Captain, I'm sensing something. It's difficult to describe, emotions that feel displaced. As if they're coming from somewhere that isn't quite here." "Red alert," Picard commanded. The bridge lighting shifted to crimson as the alert klaxon sounded. "Shields up. Mr. Worf, tactical analysis." The Klingon security chief's fingers danced across his console. "The anomaly is expanding, Captain. It is generating a subspace rupture, bearing directly toward our position. Impact in 45 seconds. Evasive maneuvers, ensign. Full impulse." The Enterprise banked hard to starboard, but the viewscreen showed the anomaly accelerating to match their course. It wasn't just expanding, it was hunting them. The rupture twisted space itself, creating a visible tear in reality that glowed with impossible colors, hues that human eyes weren't meant to process. "Captain, the rupture is destabilizing our warp field," Geordi LaForge called out from engineering. "I'm reading massive gravimetric distortions. If we don't break away in the next 20 seconds, we're going to get pulled in." "All power to engines," Picard ordered. The ship shuddered as the rupture's gravitational pull intensified. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the anomaly released them and collapsed inward. But something else emerged, 6 distinct energy signatures, materializing in rapid succession across different sections of the ship. "Intruder alert," Worf announced, his hand already on his phaser. 6 unidentified humanoids have appeared on multiple decks. Transporter signatures do not match any known technology. "Locations?" Picard demanded. 1 in engineering, 2 in 10 forward, 1 in sickbay, 1 in cargo bay 2, and 1, Worf paused, his expression darkening. 1 on the bridge, Captain." Before anyone could react, a shimmering effect materialized behind the tactical station. The figure that appeared was clad in red, white, and blue, a man holding a circular shield emblazoned with a star, his uniform unlike anything in Starfleet's records. He stumbled slightly, disoriented, then immediately assessed his surroundings with the tactical precision of a soldier. His eyes locked onto Picard. "Where am I?" the man asked, his voice steady despite the obvious confusion. "Who are you people?" Worf's phaser was already drawn and aimed. "Do not move. Identify yourself." The man raised his hand slowly, the shield still gripped in one. "My name is Steve Rogers. Captain America. I don't know how I got here, but I'm not your enemy." His gaze swept the bridge, the unfamiliar technology, the alien officer pointing a weapon at him, the bald captain regarding him with cautious diplomacy. "This isn't Earth. Is it?" Picard stepped forward, his posture deliberately non-threatening despite Worf's protest. "No, Captain Rogers, this is not Earth, or at least, not your Earth. I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. You are aboard a vessel of the United Federation of Planets, and you've arrived through what appears to be a dimensional anomaly." Dimensional? Steve's tactical mind processed the information instantly. We were fighting Thanos. There was an explosion, something to do with the stones. The energy was, he trailed off, recognizing the futility of explaining something he barely understood himself. "You mentioned others," Picard observed. "Your team. The Avengers. If I'm here, they might be too. Tony, Thor, Bruce, Natasha, Clint, we were together when the anomaly hit." Data's console chimed. "Captain, I am detecting elevated stress hormones and accelerated cellular activity consistent with enhanced human physiology. Captain Rogers appears to be augmented beyond baseline human parameters." "Super soldier serum," Steve explained. "But that's not important right now. If my team is scattered across this ship, we need to find them before someone gets hurt. Some of them are dangerous when they're confused or threatened." As if on cue, a tremendous crash echoed through the comm system from engineering, followed by Geordi's panicked voice. "Bridge, we have a situation down here. Someone just tore through a bulkhead with their bare hands, and they're turning green." The Hulk had arrived in the Star Trek universe. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. Picard's expression remained calm, but his next words carried the weight of command. "Mr. Worf, assemble security teams. Counselor Troy, you're with me. Captain Rogers, if you truly wish to help, I suggest you assist us in locating your teammates before this situation escalates beyond control." Steve nodded, lowering his shield slightly. "Agreed. But Captain Picard, you should know that the Hulk doesn't respond well to weapons fire. If your people try to subdue him with force, it'll only make things worse." "Then we shall endeavor to use reason instead," Picard replied, though his tone suggested he understood how difficult that might prove. "Welcome to the 24th century, Captain Rogers. Let us hope your arrival is not as catastrophic as it appears." Engineering was chaos. The Hulk, 8 feet of green, rage-fueled muscle, had emerged from disorientation directly into a confined space filled with humming machinery and plasma conduits. His roar shook the entire deck as he swatted aside a control console, sending sparks cascading across the floor. Geordi LaForge had ordered an immediate evacuation, but 2 engineers remained trapped behind the warp core, frozen in terror as the creature advanced. "Don't shoot!" Steve Rogers shouted as he burst through the engineering doors alongside Picard and Worf. The Klingon's phaser was already raised, set to maximum stun. "That'll only make him angrier." "Then what do you suggest?" Worf growled, his warrior instincts screaming at him to neutralize the threat. Steve stepped forward, his shield lowered. "Bruce. It's Steve. You're safe. We're all safe." The Hulk spun toward the voice, his massive fists clenched. For a moment, recognition flickered in those jade eyes, something human beneath the fury. But then he caught sight of the phaser in Worf's hand, and the rage returned. "Weapon!" He charged. Steve barely had time to raise his shield before 2 tons of angry green scientists collided with him. The impact sent both of them crashing through the engineering bay doors and into the corridor beyond. The Hulk's fist hammered against the vibranium shield, each blow generating a metallic clang that echoed like thunder. "Stand down!" Worf commanded, firing his phaser at maximum setting. The energy beam struck the Hulk's shoulder and dissipated harmlessly across his skin. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he turned his attention to Worf, and a low, dangerous growl rumbled from his chest. Picard activated his communicator. "Picard to data. Erect a level 10 force field around Deck 12, Section 4. Now. Acknowledged, Captain. Shimmering barriers materialized at both ends of the corridor, trapping the Hulk, Steve, Worf, and Picard together. The Hulk pounded against the force field, testing its strength. Sparks flew with each impact, but the barrier held, for now. "Bruce, listen to me," Steve said, rising to his feet despite the pain radiating through his ribs. "I know you're scared. I know this doesn't make sense. But we're not in danger. These people aren't Hydra. They're not enemies. They point weapons," the Hulk snarled, his voice a guttural bass. "Hulk smash weapons." Picard stepped forward, his hands carefully visible and empty. "I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard. You are aboard my ship, and you have my word that no one here wishes you harm. We are explorers, not soldiers. Our mission is peaceful." The Hulk's eyes narrowed, studying this strange bald man who spoke with such calm authority. Deanna Troi emerged from behind Picard, her presence immediately shifting the emotional tenor of the corridor. She could feel the Hulk's rage, but beneath it, she sensed something else. Fear. Confusion. And buried deepest of all, the terrified consciousness of Bruce Banner, struggling to regain control. "You're afraid," Troi said softly. "You don't know where you are or how you got here. That's why you're angry. But you don't want to hurt anyone. I can feel that too." The Hulk's breathing slowed. His fists unclenched slightly. "Where is Banner?" "Right here," Troi assured him. "Bruce Banner is still inside you. He's trying to come back. Let him. You're safe now." For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then the Hulk's massive frame began to shrink. Green skin faded to human flesh tones. Muscles contracted. Within moments, Dr. Bruce Banner stood in the corridor, naked and shivering, his expression haunted. Geordi appeared with a Starfleet jacket, which Bruce accepted gratefully. "Thanks. And I'm sorry about your engineering bay. When I don't know where I am, the other guy tends to overreact." "Understandable," Picard replied, though his tone suggested he would be having words with his chief engineer about the damage. "Dr. Banner, I presume?" "Yeah. 7 PhDs in physics, biophysics, and nuclear engineering. Also cursed with gamma radiation that turns me into a giant rage monster. It's complicated." Bruce rubbed his temples, fighting off the post-transformation headache. "Where are the others?" "Tony, Thor." An explosion rocked the ship. Alarms blared across all decks. "Bridge to Captain Picard," Data's voice came through the comm with unusual urgency. "We have a situation in 10 forward. 2 of the intruders are engaged in combat with each other, one appears to be generating massive electrical discharges, while the other has deployed some form of advanced powered armor. Casualties are mounting among the civilian personnel." Steve and Bruce exchanged glances. "Thor and Tony," they said simultaneously. "They're fighting?" Steve's brow furrowed. "Why would they?" "Disorientation," Bruce interjected. If Thor woke up surrounded by strangers in an unfamiliar environment, his first instinct would be to defend himself. And if Tony saw what looked like a Norse god attacking civilians, he'd engage, Steve finished grimly. "We need to get up there. Now." Picard tapped his communicator again. "Transporter room 2-6 to beam directly to 10 forward. Energize." The familiar tingle of the transporter effect surrounded them, a sensation that made Bruce's skin crawl as his molecules were disassembled and reassembled half a ship away. They materialized in the midst of a war zone. 10 forward, normally a peaceful lounge where crew members relaxed and socialized, had been transformed into a battlefield. Thor stood at the center of the room, Mjolnir crackling with lightning, his eyes glowing with electric fury. Tables and chairs lay scattered like toys. Guinan, the ship's enigmatic bartender, had shepherded most of the civilians behind the bar, but several crew members lay injured near the windows. Hovering opposite Thor was Iron Man, repulsors charged and aimed. Tony Stark's voice emanated from the suit's speakers, synthesized and cold. "Stand down, Asgardian. I don't know what kind of trick this is, shapeshifters, LMDs, whatever, but you're not taking hostages." "I take no hostages, Tin Man," Thor rumbled, lightning dancing along Mjolnir's head. "I defend myself against those who would restrain the son of Odin. Lower your weapons, or face the storm." "Oh great, it's the ego routine," Tony shot back. "Jarvis, analyze the target. Find me a weak point. Both of you, stop." Steve's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He strode between them, shield raised, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Stand down. Both of you. Right now." Thor's eyes widened in recognition. "Rogers? By the Norns, where are we?" "The last I remember, we were in the compound, Thanos' forces, the stones. And then we got pulled through some kind of wormhole," Tony finished, his faceplate retracting to reveal a bewildered expression. "Cap, what the hell is going on? Why are we on a cruise ship in space with pointy-eared aliens?" Picard cleared his throat diplomatically. "I can assure you, Mr. Stark, this is not a cruise ship. And while we do have Vulcan crew members, would appreciate it if you refrain from referring to them as pointy-eared aliens. We are all equals aboard this vessel." Tony's eyes locked onto Picard, and his HUD immediately began scanning. "Right. Sorry. But seriously, where are we? When are we? My armor's sensors are going haywire, and Jarvis can't connect to any satellites, networks, or databases. It's like Earth's infrastructure just doesn't exist." "That is because you are no longer in your universe," Data explained, stepping forward. The android's precise movements and golden eyes immediately caught Tony's attention. "You have been transported through a dimensional anomaly into our reality, specifically, the year 2368 by your calendar reckoning, though our Federation stardate system differs." "An android," Tony breathed, his engineer's mind immediately fascinated. "Positronic brain? Neural net? How do you—" He stopped himself, shaking his head. "Focus, Stark. We can geek out later." Thor lowered Mjolnir, the lightning dissipating. "If what you say is true, then we are far from home. Asgard's Bifrost cannot reach across dimensions." His expression darkened. "Heimdall cannot see us here." "We'll find a way back," Steve assured him, then turned to Picard. "But first, we need to locate Natasha and Clint. They're still out there somewhere." "Already done," came a woman's voice from behind the bar. Black Widow emerged from the shadows where she'd been observing the entire confrontation, her widow's bites charged but not activated. "I woke up in some kind of medical facility. Knocked out the guards, non-lethally, and made my way here following the sounds of combat." Hawkeye dropped from a ceiling access panel, bow in hand. "Cargo bay. Took me about 5 minutes to figure out this wasn't a shield helicarrier. The technology's too advanced, and nobody recognized the Avengers." He landed gracefully beside Natasha. "So. Alternate dimension?" "Apparently," Natasha confirmed. The 6 Avengers stood together now, unconsciously forming a defensive perimeter as they assessed their situation. Picard observed them carefully, their combat readiness, their immediate tactical coordination, their underlying assumption that trust must be earned rather than given freely. These were warriors who had seen too much betrayal to accept help at face value. "If I may," Picard said, his voice carrying the diplomatic weight of a man who had negotiated with Romulans, Klingon, and even the Borg. "You find yourselves in an unfamiliar situation, in an unknown universe, surrounded by what you perceive as potential threats. I understand your caution. But I would ask that you extend us the same courtesy we are attempting to extend you. We are not your enemies. The United Federation of Planets stands for peace, cooperation, and the exploration of the unknown. You are unknown. Therefore, we would very much like to understand you. Tony's faceplate closed, then opened again, a nervous tick. What exactly do you want to understand? Everything, Picard replied simply. But first, I propose we move this conversation to somewhere less damaged. Conference room. We'll discuss your situation, answer your questions, and determine how best to proceed. Does that seem reasonable? The Avengers exchanged glances. An unspoken conversation passed between them, the kind of wordless communication that only came from fighting together, bleeding together, nearly dying together. Finally, Steve nodded. Reasonable. But Captain Picard, we go armed, and we stay together. No separating us, no holding cells, no security protocols. If this goes sideways, we need to be able to defend ourselves. Worf bristled at the implication, but Picard raised a hand to forestall his security chief's objection. Agreed. Though I would ask that you refrain from destroying any more of my ship. Bruce winced. About that engineering bay. We'll discuss reparations later, Dr. Banner, Picard said with the faintest hint of a smile. For now, let us see if warriors and explorers can find common ground. The conference room's long table had never hosted such an unusual assembly. On one side sat Picard, Data, Geordi LaForge, and Dr. Beverly Crusher, who had insisted on attending after treating the injured crew members from 10 forward. On the other side, Earth's mightiest heroes occupied their chairs with varying degrees of comfort. Thor sat with regal bearing, Mjolnir resting on the table before him. Tony's armor had retracted into a more casual configuration, though everyone could see it was ready to deploy in milliseconds. Steve's shield leaned against his chair. Natasha and Clint flanked the group, their eyes constantly scanning for exits and threats. Bruce looked exhausted, his fingers wrapped around a cup of Earl Grey that Picard had offered. Let me see if I understand correctly, Picard began, his hands folded on the table. You six represent Earth's primary defense force against extraterrestrial and supernatural threats. You've battled alien invasions, rogue artificial intelligences, and beings you describe as gods. And you were engaged in combat with an entity named Thanos when the anomaly transported you here. That's the short version, Steve confirmed. Thanos was trying to collect 6 Infinity Stones, objects of cosmic power that can manipulate reality, time, space, and more. We were trying to stop him. Data's head tilted with curiosity. Fascinating. The concept of objects capable of manipulating fundamental universal constants defies several principles of physics as we understand them. Yet your presence here suggests that such manipulation is indeed possible. Which brings us to the uncomfortable question, Geordi added, adjusting his visor. How do we get you home? I've been running sensor analysis on the residual energy signatures from your arrival. The quantum variance is unlike anything I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of weird things in this job. Sounds like S.H.I.E.L.D.'s mission statement, Clint observed. Right up until we found out Hydra had infiltrated it from the beginning. We've learned not to take peaceful intentions at face value, Natasha added. No offense, Captain, but we've heard a lot of pretty speeches from people who turned out to be anything but peaceful. Picard's expression remained diplomatic, but there was steel beneath. I understand your skepticism. Trust must be earned. However, I would point out that we could have confined you in the brig, or attempted to forcibly restrain you. Instead, we are having a conversation. That should tell you something about our intentions. Bruce spoke up, his voice quiet but carrying weight. The question isn't really about trust, though. It's about capability. Even if you wanted to help us get home, and I'm inclined to believe you do, can you actually do it? Dimensional travel isn't exactly routine, even in our universe. And from what I'm hearing, it's not routine here either. You are correct, Data confirmed. The Federation has encountered dimensional anomalies on 17 documented occasions. In only 3 instances were we able to successfully return displaced individuals to their origin point. The success rate is approximately 17.65%. Great odds, Tony said dryly. Jarvis, what are the chances we can jury-rig something ourselves? Insufficient data, sir, the AI responded through Tony's suit speakers. I cannot access local databases or scientific repositories. Without understanding this universe's fundamental physics, any calculations would be speculative at best. Dr. Crusher leaned forward, her medical expertise overriding diplomatic protocols. Mr. Stark, I need to ask, are you aware that your arc reactor is generating low-level radiation? Nothing immediately dangerous, but prolonged exposure could cause cellular damage. Tony's hand unconsciously moved to his chest. It's shielded. The Mark 50 armor has built-in radiation dampening. In your universe, perhaps, Crusher replied. Here, the radiation is leaking through. I'd like to examine you, all of you, to ensure there are no adverse effects from the dimensional transition. She has a point, Bruce said. When I transformed earlier, it felt different. Harder to control. The gamma radiation that triggers the Hulk might be interacting with whatever passes for background radiation here. And I cannot sense Asgard, Thor added, his voice carrying an undertone of concern. The Bifrost, Heimdall's sight, all severed. My connection to Mjolnir remains, but I feel diminished. As if the very realm we occupy does not fully recognize what I am. Geordi's fingers flew across his PADD. That actually makes sense. Your dimensional signatures are trying to reconcile with our universe's quantum baseline. Think of it like two different operating systems trying to run the same program. There's going to be compatibility issues until your physiology and technology fully synchronize. How long? Steve asked. Impossible to say, Geordi admitted. Could be days. Could be weeks. But the longer you're here, the more you'll acclimate. Which means the longer we wait to find a way home, the harder it might become, Natasha observed. Our quantum signatures might sync so thoroughly with this universe that we can't resonate with our original one anymore. An astute observation, Data agreed. If we are to attempt returning you, time is indeed a factor. Picard stood, walking to the conference room's window. The stars streaked past at warp speed, a vista of infinite possibility. Before we discuss methods of return, there is another matter we must address. You possess abilities and technology far beyond anything the Federation has encountered. Your presence here could have significant implications. You're worried we'll break something, Tony translated. Or that the wrong people will want to dissect us. I am concerned that others may view you as weapons to be acquired, Picard corrected. The Romulan Empire, for instance, would be extremely interested in Captain Rogers's enhanced physiology, or Dr. Banner's transformation capability. The Klingon would see warriors worthy of combat, or conquest. And there are other forces in this galaxy that would not hesitate to capture you for study or exploitation. Like the Borg, Data added matter-of-factly. A cybernetic collective consciousness that assimilates entire civilizations. They seek technological and biological distinctiveness to add to their own. You would represent significant distinctiveness. Cybernetic collective, Bruce repeated slowly. You mean a hive mind? Networked consciousness? Precisely. They are one of the greatest threats the Federation has ever faced. Tony's expression darkened. So basically, we've jumped from fighting one universe-threatening bad guy into a universe with multiple universe-threatening bad guys. Fantastic. Not quite, Picard said. Thanos, from your description, sought to impose his will through acquisition of ultimate power. The Borg seek perfection through assimilation. The distinction matters. One can be reasoned with, however difficult. The other cannot. And which are they? Steve asked. The Borg cannot be reasoned with, Picard replied, and for the first time, the Avengers heard something in his voice that sounded like haunted memory. I speak from experience. The room fell silent. Deanna Troi, who had been observing quietly from the corner, could feel the weight of Picard's trauma, and the Avengers' recognition of it. These were people who understood what it meant to be violated, to be made into a weapon against your will. Then we have something in common, Natasha said softly. We've all been used by forces we couldn't control. Sounds like you have too, Captain. Picard met her eyes, and something passed between them, an understanding that transcended universes. Indeed. Which is why I will do everything in my power to help you return home. But while you are here, I must ask for your cooperation. The Prime Directive, our most sacred law, prohibits interference with less advanced civilizations. Your presence complicates that principle immensely. Because we're from a less advanced civilization? Steve asked. Because you represent capabilities that could alter the balance of power in this galaxy, Picard explained. If the Klingon Empire acquired Dr. Banner's transformation ability, or the Romulan Tal Shiar reverse-engineered Mr. Stark's technology, the consequences could be catastrophic. Thor's laugh was bitter. You speak as if we have a choice in the matter. If these forces you describe are as powerful as you claim, what makes you think we can hide from them? Because we have something they don't, Picard replied. The full resources of the United Federation of Planets, and a commitment to protecting those who cannot protect themselves, even if they are more than capable of protecting themselves. Tony stood, his armor systems running constant diagnostics. Okay, let's cut to the chase. You're offering to help us, but you want something in return. What is it? Access to our technology? Military alliance? What's the price? Your discretion, Picard said simply. While we work to return you home, I ask that you remain aboard the Enterprise. Allow us to study the dimensional anomaly that brought you here. Cooperate with Dr. Crusher's medical examinations. And most importantly, do not engage with other species or factions without consulting me first. Your interventionist philosophy, while admirable, could violate principles that have kept the Federation stable for 2 centuries. The Avengers exchanged glances again. Their entire purpose was to intervene, to stand between humanity and threats they couldn't handle alone. Being asked to stand down, to trust strangers, went against every instinct they'd developed. And if we say no? Clint asked. If we decide we'd rather take our chances on our own? Then I will not stop you, Picard replied. But I would strongly advise against it. This galaxy is dangerous in ways you cannot yet comprehend. The Enterprise offers safety, resources, and the best chance of finding a way home. Reject that, and you may find yourselves facing threats that even Earth's mightiest heroes cannot overcome. Steve looked at his team, his family. They'd been through hell together. They'd saved the world more times than he could count. But Picard was right about one thing, they were in unknown territory now. Every tactical advantage they'd built, every contact, every safe house, all of it was gone. They were alone in a universe that didn't know them and might not want them. We'll stay, Steve said finally. But on our terms. We're not prisoners, and we're not lab rats. We cooperate, you help us get home. Deal? Picard extended his hand. Deal, Captain Rogers. They shook, 2 captains from different worlds, both carrying the weight of command. Neither fully trusted the other yet, but they recognized something fundamental, both were men of principle, and in a universe of unknowns, that was a place to start. Now, Picard said, returning to his seat. Let us discuss exactly what an Infinity Stone is, and why its energy signature might be the key to sending you home. 3 days had passed since the Avengers' arrival. The Enterprise had maintained its course through the Kalra expanse while Geordi, Data, and Tony worked around the clock in engineering, attempting to recreate the dimensional signature that had brought the team across realities. Bruce had joined them, his 7 PhDs proving invaluable as they wrestled with the intersection of quantum mechanics and subspace physics. The 2 universes' laws didn't quite align, but where they overlapped, fascinating possibilities emerged. Thor had taken to wandering the ship's corridors, Mjolnir at his side, engaging crew members in conversation about their worlds and cultures. The Asgardian found kinship with Worf, who appreciated directness and warrior's honor, even if their definitions differed. Steve spent hours in the observation lounges, watching the stars streak past at speeds that defied everything he'd understood about physics. Natasha and Clint had made themselves useful in 10 Forward, observing the crew's social dynamics and gathering intelligence through casual conversation, old habits from their espionage days. It was during one of these quiet observation periods that the crisis began. "Captain, to the bridge," came the urgent call over the ship-wide comm. "We're receiving a distress signal." Picard arrived within moments, the Avengers not far behind. They'd been in the gym. Worf had been teaching Steve Klingon combat techniques while Natasha sparred with Clint. The team had adopted a policy of staying close to the bridge during duty hours, ready to respond if needed. The view screen showed a small vessel tumbling through space, trailing plasma and debris. Its hull was scorched, and life support was clearly failing. "Hail them," Picard ordered. Data's fingers moved across his console. "No response, Captain. Their communication systems appear to be offline. However, I am detecting 3 life signs aboard, humanoid, though the readings are distorted by radiation interference. Can we beam them out?" Picard asked. "The radiation is too intense," Geordi reported from his engineering station. "We'd need to stabilize their ship first, or risk losing them in the transport buffer." "Tractor beam. Bring them in close. Prepare an away team for emergency extraction." "Captain," Worf interjected, his tone cautious. "Sensors indicate the vessel is of Vistari design. The Vistari system is under Kardashian jurisdiction. If we intervene, there are lives at stake, Lieutenant," Picard said firmly. "The Prime Directive does not apply to rescue operations. Prepare the away team." Steve stepped forward. "Captain, let us help. We've done extractions before. If that ship is as unstable as it looks, you'll need people who can move fast and handle themselves if things go wrong." Picard hesitated. This was precisely the situation he'd hoped to avoid, the Avengers engaging with other species, potentially revealing their capabilities to unknown observers. But Rogers made a valid point. The ship was deteriorating rapidly, and time was critical. "Very well. Worf, take Captain Rogers and Miss Romanoff with you. Standard extraction protocol. Get those people out alive." Minutes later, the away team materialized aboard the damaged vessel. Emergency lighting flickered, casting eerie shadows across corridors filled with smoke. The air was thin, barely breathable. Worf's tricorder guided them toward the life signs while Steve and Natasha flanked him, moving with the practiced efficiency of combat veterans. They found the survivors in what remained of the bridge, a woman and 2 children, huddled behind an overturned console. The woman looked up with desperate eyes, speaking rapidly in a language the universal translator struggled to parse through the interference. "Kardashians," she managed in broken Federation standard. "They attacked, took our cargo, left us to die. We're here to help," Steve said, his voice calm and reassuring despite the chaos. "Can you walk?" The woman nodded weakly, clutching her children close. One of them, a boy no older than 8, stared at Steve's shield with wide eyes. The other, a girl, was unconscious, blood seeping from a head wound. Natasha knelt beside them, her medical training kicking in. "She needs a doctor. Now." Worf to Enterprise. 3 to beam directly to sickbay. Energize. As the survivors shimmered away, an explosion rocked the ship. The remaining structural integrity failed, and the deck beneath them began to buckle. Steve grabbed Worf as a support beam crashed down. Natasha rolled clear, but the transporter window had closed, they'd need to wait for the beam to recycle. Worf to Enterprise. Emergency beam out. Now. "We're trying," Geordi's voice crackled through the comm, "the ship's power core just went critical. The radiation spike is blocking the transporter lock." The vessel lurched violently. Through a tear in the hull, Steve could see the Enterprise's shields glowing as the ship prepared to move to a safe distance. They were running out of time. How long until core breach? Natasha asked, already calculating escape vectors. 30 seconds, Worf replied grimly. Steve's mind raced through options. They couldn't beam out. They couldn't reach an escape pod in time. The ship was breaking apart around them. In his universe, this would be the moment Tony flew in with the armor, or Thor summoned the Bifrost. But here, they had only themselves. The cargo bay, Steve said suddenly. If this was a transport ship, there might be emergency ejection systems for the cargo containers. We could ride one out. An excellent theory, Worf acknowledged, already running toward the bay. If the systems are still functional. They burst into the cargo bay to find it nearly empty. The Kardashians had indeed stripped it clean. But one container remained, magnetically locked to the deck. Worf's tricorder confirmed it had minimal emergency thrusters and a distress beacon. 15 seconds, Natasha called out, working frantically to override the magnetic locks. Steve and Worf forced open the container's access panel, revealing a cramped interior designed for cargo, not passengers. They squeezed inside as Natasha slapped the emergency release. The container explosively detached from the dying ship, tumbling into space just as the core breach turned the vessel into an expanding sphere of plasma and debris. Inside the container, pressed against each other in the darkness, the three of them waited. The emergency beacon pulsed weakly. Life support was minimal, they had perhaps 10 minutes of air. Steve's enhanced physiology could survive longer, and Worf's Klingon constitution provided some advantage, but Natasha was operating on borrowed time. Well, she said with dark humor, this is cozy. The Enterprise will recover us, Worf assured them. Captain Picard does not abandon his crew. We're not his crew, Steve pointed out. You risked your life to save those people, Worf replied. That makes you crew enough. True to Worf's word, the transporter effect shimmered through the container's walls 2 minutes later. They materialized in the transporter room to find Picard waiting, his expression troubled. Report, he ordered. 3 survivors recovered, Worf confirmed. The vessel was destroyed. Evidence suggests Kardashian attack as the woman claimed. Dr. Crusher is treating the family now, Picard said. They'll survive, thanks to your quick action. He paused, his eyes moving between Steve and Natasha. However, we have a complication. The survivors are refugees, illegally fleeing Kardashian territory. By rescuing them, we've created an incident. An incident? Steve's voice carried an edge. We saved lives. And in doing so, violated Kardashian sovereignty, Picard replied. The Vistari system is under their jurisdiction. Those refugees are, technically, Kardashian subjects. They will demand we return them. Natasha's eyes narrowed. And will you? The question hung in the air like a challenge. This was the moment Picard had warned them about, when Federation principles collided with moral clarity. When the rules designed to maintain peace demanded actions that felt wrong on every human level. No, Picard said finally. I will not. But the decision will have consequences. As if summoned by his words, Data's voice came over the comm, Captain, we are being hailed by a Cardassian warship. They are demanding we heave to and prepare to transfer custody of 3 fugitives. The Avengers followed Picard to the bridge. On the view screen, a Cardassian Galer-class warship hung in space, its weapons powered but not yet locked. The screen shifted to show a Cardassian officer, gray skin, scaled neck ridges, eyes as cold as stone. I am Ghoul Kentar of the Third Order, the officer announced. You are harboring criminals who have stolen Cardassian property and fled justice. Under the treaty between the Cardassian Union and the Federation, you are required to return them immediately. Ghoul Kentar, Picard replied with icy diplomacy, the individuals aboard my ship are refugees seeking asylum. They claim persecution under Cardassian rule. Federation law grants them the right to petition for asylum before any transfer occurs. They are lying to exploit your naive humanitarian principles, Kentar sneered. They are thieves. The cargo they carried was stolen from a Union warehouse. Then you should have no objection to allowing them to present their case before a neutral arbiter, Picard countered. I'm certain the truth will emerge. The truth is that you violate our sovereignty by refusing to return them, Kentar's voice hardened. Return them, or face the consequences. Tony had been listening from the rear of the bridge, his armor in standby mode. Okay, so this is the part where I'm confused, he interjected, stepping forward. You've got rules about not interfering with other cultures, but you're also part of a treaty that says you have to hand over refugees to their oppressors. How does that work? Picard shot him a warning glance, but the damage was done. Kentar's attention focused on Tony with predatory interest. And who are you, human? Your armor is unlike any Starfleet design. Your presence on the bridge suggests importance. I'm nobody, Tony replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. Just an observer. Observers do not question diplomatic protocols, Kentar said slowly. Interesting. Perhaps there is more happening aboard the Enterprise than simple refugee harboring. The screen went dark as Kentar terminated the connection. Picard turned to Tony, his expression carefully controlled. Mr. Stark, I appreciate your moral clarity, but you've just made this situation significantly more complicated. How? By pointing out your rules contradict each other. By revealing that we're harboring individuals the Kardashians don't recognize, Picard replied. Kentar is suspicious now. He'll investigate. And if he discovers 6 enhanced individuals with technology and abilities beyond Federation standards, the Kardashian Union will escalate this beyond a simple refugee dispute. Steve stepped between them. With respect, Captain, Tony's got a point. You saved those people. Now you're going to negotiate about whether they deserve to stay saved. In my experience, when someone threatens violence unless you hand over innocent people, the answer is pretty simple. No. Your experience is from a different universe, Captain Rogers, Picard replied, his tone sharp. In this one, refusing to return those refugees could spark a war. The Kardashian Union and the Federation maintain a fragile peace. Incidents like this can spiral into conflicts that cost millions of lives. So you'd sacrifice 3 people to maintain peace? Natasha asked quietly. That's not peace. That's appeasement. Deanna Troi spoke from her seat beside the captain's chair. Captain, I sensed enormous fear from Ghoul Kentar when he saw Mr. Stark. Not anger, fear. He's more concerned about what Tony represents than about the refugees. Because he's smart, Bruce said, emerging from the turbolift with Geordi. He saw advanced technology and immediately recognized a threat to his tactical understanding. Classic military response to unknown capabilities. Picard sat heavily in his chair, the weight of command evident. Recommendations? We could claim diplomatic immunity for the Avengers, Data suggested. Designate them as special envoys from an undisclosed Federation ally. The Kardashians would have no legal standing to demand information about them. That would only increase their suspicion, Worf countered. They would view it as the Federation acquiring new weapons. Tension would escalate. Or, Thor's voice rumbled from where he'd been standing silently near the turbolift, you could allow us to solve this problem as we would in our realm. We face this Kardashian in honest combat. If he wins, he takes the refugees. If we win, they go free. We are not resolving this through combat, Picard said firmly. Then how? Steve asked. Because from where I'm standing, you've got 3 innocent people who'll be sent back to oppression, a hostile force demanding you comply, and rules that tie your hands. That's exactly the kind of situation the Avengers were formed to handle. By doing what? Destroying the Kardashian warship. Starting an interstellar war. By standing between innocent people and those who'd harm them, Steve replied simply. It's what we do. It's what we are. Picard met Steve's eyes, and the bridge fell silent. Two philosophies stood opposed, one built on centuries of carefully constructed rules designed to prevent catastrophe, the other forged in the fires of immediate action and moral certainty. Neither was wrong. Neither was complete. Mr. Data, Picard said finally, plot a course to Starbase 157. Maximum warp. We'll transport the refugees to Federation custody there, where they can formally petition for asylum through proper channels. If the Kardashians pursue, we'll deal with that when it happens. Captain, Worf warned, that course takes us through the Modin system. It is disputed territory. The Kardashians will view it as provocation. Then we'll have to be very careful not to provoke them, Picard replied. Engage. The Enterprise leaped to warp, leaving the Cardassian warship behind. But on the view screen, just before the stars blurred into streaks of light, they all saw the warship turn to follow. The chase had begun. The Cardassian warship matched the Enterprise's course through the Modin system, maintaining a distance of exactly 100,000 kilometers, close enough to track, far enough to avoid immediate confrontation. Ghoul Kentar was playing a waiting game, and Picard knew it. The moment the Enterprise crossed into genuinely disputed space, the Cardassians would have justification for more aggressive action. They're running silent, Worf reported from Tactical. No active scans, no hails. They are simply following. Waiting for us to make a mistake, Picard observed. Or for reinforcements to arrive. In the conference room, Picard had assembled his senior staff along with the Avengers. The refugees, a woman named Tala and her children, Ren and Sarah, were recovering in sickbay under Dr. Crusher's care. Sarah's head wound had been treated, but the psychological trauma would take longer to heal. I've reviewed Tala's testimony, Troy reported. She's telling the truth about the Cardassian attack. Her family operated a small transport business in the Vistari system. When they refused to carry weapons for the Cardassian military, a violation of their religious beliefs, their business license was revoked. They were being relocated to a labor camp when they escaped. Labor camp, Natasha repeated, her voice flat. Is that Federation speak for concentration camp? Troy's expression darkened. The Cardassians call them rehabilitation centers. In practice, yes. And yet you have a treaty with them, Tony said, disbelief coloring his words. You know they run concentration camps, and you maintain diplomatic relations? The alternative would be war, Picard replied. A war that would cost billions of lives across dozens of worlds. The Federation chooses to engage diplomatically, to pressure for reform through peaceful means. How's that working out? Clint asked dryly. Slowly, Picard admitted. But history has shown that isolation and military confrontation only entrench authoritarian regimes. Engagement, however frustrating, offers hope for gradual change. Steve leaned forward, his voice measured but firm. Captain, I understand the logic. I do. But I've also seen what happens when good people decide that maintaining peace is more important than stopping evil. The Nazis didn't get stopped through engagement. They got stopped when people were willing to fight. The Cardassians are not the Nazis, Captain Rogers. Aren't they? Steve gestured toward Troy's report. Forced relocations. Labor camps. Persecution of religious minorities. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck. The galaxy is not so simple, Picard replied, though his tone suggested he'd had this exact argument with himself many times. The Cardassians suffered through decades of resource scarcity and environmental collapse. Their authoritarian government emerged from desperation, not ideology. Many Cardassians oppose these policies but lack the power to change them. Then we help those people, Steve insisted. We don't negotiate with their oppressors. Before Picard could respond, alarms blared across the bridge. Data's voice cut through the tension. Captain, sensors detect 3 additional Cardassian vessels entering the system. Gaylor-class warships, bearing directly toward our position. For ships, Worf observed grimly. They mean to surround us. Picard stood. Mr. Data, time to Federation space. At current speed, 47 minutes. However, the Kardashian vessels will intercept us in approximately 12 minutes if they maintain their approach vector. Captain, came Ghoul Kenter's voice over the comm, his image appearing on the view screen. You have attempted to flee Kardashian justice. This confirms your guilt. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded, or we will open fire. Ghoul Kentar, we are on a direct course to Federation space. You have no authority to detain us here. The Modin system falls under Kardashian jurisdiction by right of conquest. You are trespassing in Union space. Comply, or face destruction. The screen went dark. On tactical, Worf's display showed the 4 Kardashian ships moving into attack formation, a classic encirclement pattern designed to eliminate escape vectors. They're powering weapons, Worf reported. Disruptor banks charging. Forward torpedo tubes loading. Tony's armor deployed instantly, the nanotech flowing over his body. Okay, so they're done talking. What's the play? We are not engaging in combat, Picard stated firmly. Ensign, evasive pattern Delta 7. Maximum impulse. The Enterprise banked hard, accelerating away from the closing net. But the Kardashian ships adjusted, their formations tightening. A disruptor beam lanced across the Enterprise's shields, causing the ship to shudder. Shields holding at 92%, Worf called out. They are testing our defenses. Return fire, minimal force, Picard ordered. Target their weapons arrays only. I want to disable, not destroy. The Enterprise's phasers struck back, precision shots that scorched Kardashian hull plating but caused no critical damage. It was a warning, nothing more. But the Kardashians responded with escalation, all 4 ships opened fire simultaneously, and the Enterprise rocked under the barrage. Shields at 78%, Worf reported. Captain, if this continues. I'm aware, Lieutenant. Thor stepped forward, Mjolnir crackling with barely restrained lightning. Allow me to disable their vessels. I can target their power systems from outside. Absolutely not, Picard interrupted. You would be exposing yourself to hard vacuum and weapons fire. And if the Kardashians capture you, they'll dissect you to learn your capabilities. Then let me go, Tony interjected. The Mark 50 can handle vacuum. I'll hit their engines, knock them offline. No casualties, no war crimes, problem solved. And reveal advanced technology that would shift the balance of power in this entire sector, Picard countered. The moment the Kardashians report that the Federation possesses human-piloted armor capable of disabling warships single-handedly, every hostile power in the quadrant will re-evaluate their strategic calculations. Another barrage struck home. Shields dropped to 60%. Sparks flew from a console near engineering, and the lights flickered. Bruce stood at the back of the bridge, his hands clenched into fists. Captain, I can feel him. The other guy. He wants out. And honestly, I'm not sure I can keep him contained much longer. Dr. Banner, the Hulk's appearance would terrify them. Yeah, I get it, Bruce replied, his eyes beginning to show the faint green tinge of transformation. But it might also make them back off. Sometimes the threat of overwhelming force prevents actual violence. Steve looked at Picard, and in that moment, both men understood they were at a crossroads. The Federation's principles demanded restraint, negotiation, adherence to rules that prevented escalation. The Avengers' instincts demanded action, immediate and decisive. Captain, Geordi's voice came from engineering. Shields are at 58%. I can reroute power from non-essential systems, but we're still outgunned 4-1. A new voice cut through the calm, female, cold, and calculating. Enterprise, this is Ghoul Torin of the Kardashian Third Order. You are harboring not only fugitives but also unidentified combatants with advanced capabilities. Intelligence assets have analyzed your recent energy signatures. We know you are concealing something significant. On the view screen, a new Kardashian officer appeared, a woman with sharper features than Kentar, her uniform decorated with the insignia of the Obsidian Order, Cardassia's elite intelligence service. Your presence in this vessel has been noted, she continued, her eyes seeming to stare directly at Tony despite the impossibility. We have recordings of the anomaly that brought you here. We know you are not Federation citizens. The question is, what are you? Natasha moved to stand beside Steve. They've been watching us from the beginning. Probably have spies on the ship. Or listening devices, Clint added. Classic intel operation. They let us talk, gather information, then spring the trap. Picard's expression remained calm, but Troy could sense his fury at the breach. Ghoul Torin, I don't know what you think you've discovered, but... We think the Federation has acquired alien assets, Torin interrupted. Beings or technology from beyond known space. Assets that violate the Treaty of Algeron and the Khitomer Accords. Assets that constitute a clear and present danger to Cardassian security. That's insane, Geordi protested. Is it? Torin's smile was predatory. Then explain the dimensional anomaly. Explain the armor that appears to generate its own power source. Explain the energy readings consistent with controlled fusion that should be impossible according to Federation technology standards. Explain the being capable of generating electrical discharges that rival a starship's power output. She'd been thorough. Every detail the Avengers had revealed, every capability they'd demonstrated, had been catalogued and analyzed. The Obsidian Order had done its work well. The Cardassian Union demands you surrender these assets for inspection, Torin concluded. Failure to comply will be interpreted as an act of war. The transmission ended. Four Cardassian warships now held firing solutions on the Enterprise, and a fifth appeared on sensors, larger, more heavily armed. A Keldon-class battleship, designed for planetary assault. They sent a battleship, Worf said, something like grudging respect in his voice. They are committed. Data turned from ops. Captain, tactical analysis suggests our probability of survival against 5 Cardassian vessels is approximately 11%. Probability of successful defense drops to 3% if we refuse to use lethal force. Then we're not defending, Tony said, his faceplate closing. We're attacking. Jarvis, target their weapons systems. Widow, Hawkeye, can you access their computer systems if I create an entry point? Probably, Natasha replied. But we'd need access to their network architecture first. I can provide that, Data offered, then stopped himself. Though doing so would be in direct violation of Captain Picard's orders. All eyes turned to Picard. The weight of the moment was palpable. He could order the Avengers to stand down, maintain Federation principles, and hope diplomacy somehow prevailed. But diplomacy had failed the moment Torin revealed her intelligence. The Cardassians wouldn't negotiate now, they'd escalate until they got what they wanted. Or he could unleash Earth's mightiest heroes and accept that doing so would change the balance of power in this galaxy forever. Captain, Steve said quietly, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that if we act, we'll start something that can't be stopped. That the rules exist for a reason. And you're right. But those rules weren't written for this situation. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, you have to break the rules to do what's right. And then what? Picard demanded. What happens when every power in this galaxy knows that the Federation harbors beings capable of disabling their warships? When the Klingon demand access to your technology? When the Romulans launch preemptive strikes to prevent us from using you as weapons? Then we leave, Steve replied. We find a way back to our universe, and your galaxy goes back to normal. But those 3 people in your sickbay, they deserve a chance at freedom. And if the only thing standing between them and a labor camp is us, then we stand. Thor moved to Steve's side. Well spoken, Rogers. I grow weary of standing idle while tyrants make demands. If we must fight, then let us fight with honor. I'm in, Tony confirmed. Jarvis already has targeting solutions locked. Just say the word. Bruce's transformation had begun, his skin showing patches of green. Can't hold him much longer. Natasha and Clint flanked the group, weapons ready. The Avengers stood united, waiting for Picard's decision. And Picard, who had faced down Romulans and Borg, who had been assimilated and recovered, who had spent his career upholding the Federation's highest ideals, made a choice that would haunt him for years to come. Mr. Worf, he said quietly, drop shields. Prepare to transport the Avengers directly into Kardashian space, coordinates adjacent to the lead warship. Whatever happens next, it happens off my ship. The Federation maintains plausible deniability. Worf's eyes widened slightly, the closest he'd come to showing surprise in years. Sir. You heard me, Lieutenant. The Avengers are not Starfleet. They are not bound by our regulations. If they choose to engage independently, that is their decision. We simply failed to stop them from leaving. A ghost of a smile crossed Steve's face. Plausible deniability. I like it. Don't mistake this for approval, Captain Rogers, Picard warned. But I will not hand innocent people over to oppressors. And I will not allow the Kardashians to take you by force. What you do with that freedom is your responsibility. Understood, Steve replied. Avengers, you know the drill. Disable their weapons and engines. The Avengers materialized in the cold vacuum of space, suspended between the Enterprise and the Kardashian fleet. For a moment, everything was silent, the absolute quiet of the void, where sound couldn't travel and death came swift and cold. Tony's HUD immediately flooded with warnings. Jarvis, what's our status? Life support systems functioning at 92% efficiency, sir. The dimensional variance is affecting power distribution, but we remain operational. However, I calculate approximately 47 minutes of combat capability before the arc reactor requires recalibration. Then we'd better make this quick. Thor spun Mjolnir, the hammer generating its own atmospheric envelope around him, Asgardian magic adapting to the vacuum as it had for millennia. I see 5 warships, each bearing weapons designed to pierce starship hulls. A worthy challenge. Bruce had completed his transformation during transport. The Hulk floated in space, disoriented and furious, his body somehow surviving the vacuum through sheer gamma-powered adaptation. His roar couldn't be heard, but his rage was visible in every tense muscle. Steve, Natasha, and Clint wore emergency environmental suits that Geordi had modified during the past 3 days, Federation EVA gear adapted for combat. The suits wouldn't last long, but they didn't need long. Spread out, Steve commanded over their encrypted comm channel. Thor, Hulk, you take the battleship. Tony, you're on the 2 ships flanking left. Natasha, Clint, and I will handle the right flank. Disable and disengage. We're not here to kill anyone. Copy that, Tony replied, already accelerating toward his targets. Jarvis, target weapons arrays and engine systems. Let's show them what Arc Reactor Mark 50 can do in a universe that's never seen it before. The Kardashians responded exactly as expected, with overwhelming force. Disruptor beams lanced through space, tracking the suddenly mobile targets. But the Avengers moved with purpose and precision, combat veterans who'd faced worse odds. Tony banked hard, his armor's flight systems adapting to the zero-gravity environment. Repulsor beams struck the first warship's forward weapons array, overloading the systems in a cascade of sparks visible through the hull breaches. That's one down. Moving to target 2. The second Kardashian ship launched a spread of photon torpedoes. Jarvis calculated trajectories in microseconds. Sir, incoming ordnance. Evasive maneuvers recommended. When have I ever taken the recommended option? Tony fired his micromissiles, each one intercepting a torpedo in brilliant detonations that lit up the void. He dove beneath the warship's ventral hull, firing precisely targeted repulsor blasts into the engine manifolds. The Kardashian vessel lurched, its warp drive flickering offline. Meanwhile, Thor and the Hulk approached the Keldon-class battleship like twin forces of nature. The Kardashians concentrated fire on the Hulk, recognizing him as the greater visible threat. Disruptor beams and plasma bolts hammered into green flesh, and the Hulk simply got angrier. Hulk smashed spaceships, he roared silently, launching himself at the battleship's hull. His fists struck reinforced duranium plating with impacts that registered on the Enterprise's sensors. Each blow dented armor designed to withstand sustained weapons fire. Inside the Kardashian vessel, crew members were thrown from their stations as the entire ship shuddered. Thor summoned lightning, not from storm clouds, which didn't exist in vacuum, but from Mjolnir itself. Electrical energy arced across the battleship's shields, finding weaknesses and exploiting them. The god of thunder had fought in the void between realms before, space held no terror for an Asgardian. Ghoul Tauren, he called out, though his voice could only be heard through her comm systems via his armor's translation matrix that Tony had jury-rigged. Your warriors fight bravely, but this battle is already won. Stand down, and no one needs to die today. Inside the battleship, Tauren watched her tactical display with growing horror. 5 warships, the pride of the Third Order, were being systematically disabled by 6 individuals. It was impossible. It violated every principle of warfare she'd studied at the Obsidian Order Academy. All ships, concentrate fire on the armored human, she ordered. Maximum yield. Destroy him before. The battleship suddenly listed to starboard. Tauren grabbed her console for stability. Report. The green creature has breached our port nacelle, her tactical officer reported, his voice tight with panic. He's tearing through the warp coils with his bare hands. Engineering reports containment failure imminent. Eject the nacelle. Now. We can't, Commander. He's wedged himself into the ejection mechanism. On the right flank, Steve, Natasha, and Clint executed their own assault. Steve's enhanced physiology allowed him to survive the vacuum longer than a normal human, though his suit's oxygen was already running low. He used his shield as both protection and projectile, throwing it with precision to strike sensor arrays and communication relays. The vibranium disc ricocheted between 2 Kardashian ships, disabling targeting systems before returning to his magnetic gauntlet. Natasha had accessed one of the warship's airlocks, using the portable hacking device Data had provided. I'm in their systems, she reported. Their security is good, but it's not shield level. Clint, cover me. Clint floated nearby, his bow adapted for zero-gravity combat. He fired specialized arrows, some explosive, some electromagnetic pulse, some simply designed to puncture hull plating at critical junctures. Each shot was calculated, precise, the work of a master marksman who'd never missed when it mattered. They're trying to get a lock on you, he warned Natasha. Internal sensors tracking your infiltration. Let them try, she replied, her fingers flying across the alien interface. The universal translator helped, but Kardashian computer architecture was deliberately obtuse. Still, she'd hacked Hydra, AIM, and a dozen other organizations. Kardashian military encryption was just another puzzle. Got it. Transferring control to Data now. Aboard the Enterprise, Data's console lit up with access to 2 Kardashian warships' primary systems. Fascinating, he observed. Their network architecture is remarkably similar to Romulan designs. I am now rerouting their weapons targeting to create a feedback loop. On the Kardashian ships, weapons consoles began smoking as they tried to target their own vessels. Confusion spread through the crews. They'd been trained to fight Starfleet, Klingon, even the Dominion. They hadn't been trained to fight enemies who could infiltrate their systems while simultaneously dismantling their ships from outside. All ships, retreat. Tauren ordered, her pride warring with tactical necessity. Fall back to the Moden defense perimeter. We need reinforcements. But retreat wasn't simple. The Hulk had disabled the battleship's engines. Thor had systematically destroyed the shield generators on another vessel. Tony had rendered 2 ships combat ineffective. And Steve's team had compromised the computer systems of the remaining warship. "No," came a transmission, Steve's voice, broadcast across all Kardashian frequencies. "You came here demanding we surrender. You threatened to destroy the Enterprise. You wanted to capture us, study us, use us as weapons. Now you know what we can do. So here's the deal, you're going to leave. You're going to report back to your superiors that the Federation is under the protection of forces you don't understand and can't defeat. And you're going to leave those 3 refugees alone. You cannot make demands of the Kardashian Union." Torrin replied, though her voice lacked conviction. "We just disabled 5 warships in under 4 minutes, Tony interjected. Without killing a single crew member, I might add. That was restraint. Push us further, and we'll show you what we can do when we're not being nice." The Hulk punctuated the threat by tearing free a massive chunk of the battleship's hull and hurling it toward one of the other vessels. The debris tumbled through space like a warning shot. Torrin stared at her tactical display, at the impossible readings showing beings who shouldn't exist dismantling her fleet like children's toys. She thought of the intelligence reports, the recordings of the dimensional anomaly, the fragmentary data suggesting these individuals came from a universe where such power was commonplace. "Stand down," she ordered her fleet, the words bitter. "All ships, minimal power. No hostile actions." Thor and the Hulk returned to the group, the Green Giant's rage subsiding now that the threat had ended. Tony collected Steve, Natasha, and Clint, his armor's magnetic grapplers keeping them together as they flew back toward the Enterprise. "Enterprise, this is Captain Rogers," Steve transmitted. "The Kardashians are standing down. Requesting transport back to the ship." "Acknowledged," came Picard's voice, and they could hear the mix of relief and concern. "Transporter room 2, energize." They materialized to find Picard waiting, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. The Avengers stood before him, some in environmental suits, one still green and massive, one encased in advanced armor, one holding a mystical hammer. They looked like gods of war, and in that moment, Picard saw them as the galaxy would, as harbingers of a new and terrifying era. "Report," he said simply. 5 Kardashian warships disabled, Steve replied. 0 casualties on either side. They've withdrawn from their attack posture. The refugees are safe. You've also demonstrated capabilities that will be reported throughout the quadrant within hours, Picard observed. The Romulans will want to know about you. The Klingon will seek to test themselves against you. The Ferengi will try to acquire your technology. And the Borg, he paused. The Borg will find you fascinating. We knew the risks, Steve said. But those 3 people deserved someone to stand up for them. And now every oppressive regime in the galaxy knows that the Federation has access to beings who can disable warships with their bare hands, Picard replied. You've changed the balance of power, Captain Rogers. I hope you understand the implications. Before Steve could respond, Worf's voice cut through from the bridge. Captain, incoming transmission. It's from a Klingon bird of prey that just decloaked directly ahead of us. Picard's eyes closed briefly. Of course. The Klingon were observing. They returned to the bridge to find a Klingon commander on the view screen, a warrior with gray in his beard but fire in his eyes. I am Commander Koth of the House of Duras. We observed your battle with the Cardassians. Impressive. I wish to meet these warriors who fight with such skill. Commander Koth, this is not the time, Picard began. I invoke the right of combat challenge, Koth interrupted, his gaze fixed on Thor. The being with the hammer. I would test my blade against his. If he is truly a warrior, he will accept. Thor stepped forward, intrigued. You wish to fight me? I wish to fight a worthy opponent, Koth replied. The Cardassians are cowards who hide behind technology. But you fought with honor, with strength, with purpose. That is the Klingon way. Face me in combat, and whether you win or lose, you will have earned the respect of the Empire. Steve moved to intercede, but Thor raised a hand. Rogers, I have faced many challenges in my time. This Klingon speaks of honor, of testing one's worth in combat. It is a language I understand. Thor, we don't have time for. We have exactly this time, Thor replied, his eyes gleaming. Among my people, to refuse a challenge is to dishonor both yourself and the challenger. If these Klingon value combat as you say, then perhaps showing them the measure of an Asgardian warrior will earn us allies rather than enemies. Picard considered this. The Klingon respected strength above all else. Refusing Koth's challenge would be seen as weakness. Accepting might establish a relationship that could prove valuable, or catastrophic. Very well, Picard said carefully. But this will be a sanctioned combat under Klingon tradition. No lethal force. First blood or submission only. Koth's laughter boomed through the speakers. Agreed, Picard. Have your warrior meet us on the planet below, Modin 3. There is an arena there where such challenges are resolved. We shall see if this thunder god fights as well as he boasts. The transmission ended. Thor was already smiling, Mjolnir spinning in his hand. An arena. How wonderfully primitive. This shall be most enjoyable. Thor, Steve said seriously, the Klingon aren't Asgardians. Their honor system is different. Be careful. I am always careful, Thor replied, though his grin suggested otherwise. Besides, what is a hero's journey without tests of valor along the way? As the Enterprise changed course toward Modin 3, Picard returned to his ready room. Guinan found him there, staring out at the stars. They're changing everything, he said without looking at her. Yes, Guinan replied simply. But change isn't always bad, Captain. Sometimes it's necessary. Is it? We've maintained peace through careful diplomacy, through rules and treaties and restraint. In one afternoon, 6 individuals demonstrated that all of that can be rendered meaningless by sufficient power. Or, Guinan suggested, they demonstrated that sometimes, rules aren't enough. That sometimes, you need people willing to stand up and fight for what's right, regardless of the consequences. Picard turned to face her. And if that philosophy spreads? If every species decides that their definition of right justifies abandoning treaties and protocols? Then you'll deal with it, Guinan said with quiet confidence. The same way you always do. With wisdom, patience, and the belief that conversation can bridge any divide, even one between universes. Picard managed a slight smile. I hope you're right. I usually am, Guinan replied. Now come on. If the Klingon are expecting a show, we should probably make sure Thor doesn't accidentally start a civil war. Modin 3 was a harsh world, rocky, wind-swept, with an atmosphere barely breathable and a red sun that cast everything in crimson shadows. The arena stood at the center of an abandoned mining colony, a circular pit carved from native stone where Klingon and Kardashians had once settled territorial disputes before the Treaty of Bajorans had formalized borders. Now it served as neutral ground, a place where warriors could resolve conflicts without sparking interstellar incidents. The Enterprise crew beamed down alongside the Avengers. Picard had insisted on full diplomatic presence. This wasn't just a fight, it was a statement. Commander Koth's bird of prey had been joined by 2 other Klingon vessels, their crews eager to witness what promised to be a legendary combat. Thor stood at the arena's edge, Mjolnir resting comfortably in his hand. He'd removed his chest armor, opting for a simpler tunic that allowed freedom of movement. The wind whipped his hair as he surveyed the gathering crowd, Klingon mostly, but also a few Ferengi traders who'd heard about the event and couldn't resist the opportunity for profit, and even a Romulan observer whose presence made Worf bristle with suspicion. This is a mistake, Worf muttered to Picard. Commander Koth is one of the Empire's finest warriors. He has won 17 challenges, killed 4 opponents in honorable combat. If Thor underestimates him. Thor's fought frost giants and dark elves, Tony interjected, his armor in standby mode. I think he can handle 1 Klingon with a pointy sword. Batleth, Worf corrected sharply. And you underestimate Klingon combat at your peril. We do not fight for sport. We fight to test the spirit, to push beyond limits, to find glory in the struggle itself. Steve stood beside Thor, speaking quietly. Remember what we discussed. You're not just representing yourself here. Every Klingon watching will judge all of us based on how you fight. Then they shall see an Asgardian prince at his finest, Thor replied confidently. Fear not, Rogers. I understand what is at stake. Commander Koth emerged from the opposite side of the arena. He was older than Thor, scarred and battle-hardened, moving with the economy of a warrior who'd survived countless conflicts. His batleth gleamed in the red sunlight, a curved blade designed for both offense and defense, uniquely Klingon in its elegant brutality. You are the one they call Thor, Koth called across the arena, his voice carrying. Son of Odin. God of Thunder. These are impressive titles. Let us see if you live up to them. And you are Koth, House of Duras, Thor replied, his voice equally strong. A name spoken with respect even across dimensional barriers. It will be an honor to test my strength against yours. A Klingon adjudicator stepped between them, a woman with silver in her hair and more scars than Koth. This combat is sanctioned under the right of challenge. First blood or submission. The warrior who yields with honor retains honor. The warrior who yields without honor is cast out. The warrior who refuses to yield, she smiled grimly, dies with honor. Are the terms understood? They are, Koth confirmed. Perfectly, Thor agreed. Then begin. Koth moved first, his batleth a blur of polished metal. He'd studied the recordings of Thor's fight against the Kardashians, noted the way the Asgardian relied on raw power and lightning. Koth's strategy was to stay close, deny Thor the space to use Mjolnir's momentum, force him into close-quarters combat where technique mattered more than strength. Thor blocked the first strike with Mjolnir's haft, the clang of metal on metal echoing across the arena. He countered with a sweeping blow that Koth rolled beneath, coming up inside Thor's guard with a slash aimed at his ribs. The batleth drew first blood, a shallow cut across Thor's side. The crowd erupted in Klingon battle cries. Thor looked down at the blood, then back at Koth, and laughed. Well struck. You are faster than you appear, warrior. And you are more durable than expected, Koth replied, already moving again. I struck a blow that should have cracked ribs. Yet you stand as if it were nothing. Asgardian constitution, Thor explained, parrying another strike. We are not so easily felled. Shall we continue? What followed was a masterclass in 2 completely different combat philosophies. Koth fought with precision, every movement economical, every strike designed to exploit openings and create new ones. He used the batleth as both weapon and shield, its curved design allowing him to redirect Thor's blows rather than absorb them. Thor fought with power and adaptability, learning Koth's patterns even as he tested the Klingons' defenses. He deliberately avoided using Mjolnir's lightning, that would end the fight too quickly, and Thor was beginning to understand that this wasn't about winning. It was about demonstrating worthiness, about showing the Klingon that honor and strength could exist in forms they didn't expect. The 2 warriors circled each other, trading blows that would have killed lesser beings. Thor's superior strength allowed him to drive Koth back, but the Klingon's technique kept him from landing decisive hits. When Thor finally caught Koth's batleth with Mjolnir and twisted, disarming the Klingon, the crowd fell silent. Thor stood over Koth, hammer raised. One blow would end it. Instead, Thor stepped back and tossed the batleth to its owner. You fight with honor, Thor said. It would be dishonorable to end this battle while you are disarmed. Take up your weapon, Koth. Let us finish this properly. The Klingon adjudicator's eyes widened. Around the arena, Klingon began beating their fists against their chests, the traditional sign of respect for a warrior's action. Even Worf looked surprised. Koth retrieved his bat'leth, his expression unreadable. When he spoke, his voice carried respect. "You understand more than I believed, Thor of Asgard. Very well. Let us indeed finish this properly." The next exchange was faster, fiercer. Both warriors had taken each other's measure and found mutual respect. Koth abandoned pure defense and went on the offensive, his bat'leth singing through the air in combinations that forced Thor to retreat for the first time. Thor responded by finally channeling lightning, not to strike Koth directly, but to electrify the ground between them, forcing the Klingon to adjust his footing. Lightning. Koth laughed, his joy evident. "Now we truly fight." Thor summoned storm clouds, or tried to. In this thin atmosphere, with this alien sun, his connection to weather was tenuous. But Mjolnir itself crackled with power, and that was enough. He charged forward, meeting Koth's assault head-on, strength against skill, thunder against steel. The moment came when both warriors struck simultaneously. Thor's blows sent Koth sprawling across the arena floor. Koth's bat'leth opened a deep gash across Thor's shoulder. Both bled. Both struggled to rise. First blood had been drawn, multiple times. Submission was the only remaining option. Koth, on his knees, looked at Thor, who stood swaying but upright. The outcome was clear. Koth had fought brilliantly, but against an Asgardian's endurance, human, or Klingon, limitations inevitably surfaced. "I yield," Koth said, the words clearly difficult but spoken without shame. "You have bested me, Thor Odinson. I yield with honor." Thor extended his hand. Koth took it, allowing the Asgardian to pull him to his feet. The arena erupted in cheers, not for Thor's victory, but for both warriors' display of honor and skill. "You fought magnificently," Thor said, genuine admiration in his voice. In another circumstance, the outcome might have been different. "Perhaps," Koth agreed. "But today, you proved yourself worthy. The Empire will remember this." He turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying authority. "I, Commander Koth of the House of Duras, declare these warriors, all of them, to be honorable allies of the Klingon Empire. Any who face them, faces the wrath of every warrior who witnessed this day." The Klingon roared approval. Worf's expression shifted from concern to something approaching pride. Even the Romulan observer seemed impressed, though she departed quickly, no doubt to report to the Tal Shiar. As the crowd dispersed, celebrating in the Klingon fashion with blood wine and battle songs, a shimmer of light appeared in the center of the arena. The temperature dropped despite the warm wind. Reality bent, twisted, and a figure materialized, humanoid, dressed in an anachronistic Starfleet uniform from centuries past, with an expression of infinite mischief. "Q," Picard said flatly, his tone carrying years of exasperation. "Mon Capitaine." Q replied with theatrical flourish. "Did you really think I'd miss this? 6 beings from another universe crash landing in my playground? Thor fighting Klingon. This is better than anything the Continuum has produced in millennia." The Avengers immediately went on alert. Tony's armor deployed fully. Steve's shield came up. Natasha and Clint took flanking positions. Bruce's eyes showed hints of green. "Who the hell is this?" Tony demanded. "Q," Picard repeated, moving between the Avengers and the entity. "An omnipotent being from the Q Continuum. He's complicated." "Complicated?" Q laughed, snapping his fingers to appear directly beside Tony, examining the armor with fascination. "I'm delightfully simple, really. I have infinite power, infinite knowledge, and an infinite appreciation for chaos. And you 6, he vanished and reappeared among the Avengers, looking at each in turn. "You magnificent little temporal anomalies, are the most interesting chaos I've seen in ages. Back off, Steve warned, though he had no idea how to threaten an omnipotent being. Or what? You'll throw your frisbee at me? Q grinned. Oh, I like you. All noble purpose and tactical thinking. Very Picard-esque, if Picard had better fashion sense. He turned to Thor. And you? An actual god. Well, god adjacent. Sufficiently advanced alien with delusions of divinity. Same thing, really. Tell me, do you miss your Bifrost? Your connection to home? Thor's grip on Mjolnir tightened. What do you want, Q? Want? I don't want anything. I'm here to offer something. A test. A trial. A magnificent experiment. Q spread his arms wide, and the arena transformed. The rocky ground became polished marble. The sky shifted to show multiple universes simultaneously, layers of reality stacked like translucent sheets. You see, the continuum has been debating something for quite some time. What happens when beings of great power meet beings of great wisdom? Force versus philosophy. Action versus contemplation. The Avengers versus the Federation. This is not a game, Q, Picard said sharply. Everything is a game, Jean-Luc. Some games just have higher stakes. Q snapped his fingers again, and suddenly the Avengers found themselves separated, each standing in a different section of the transformed arena, facing a challenge specifically designed for them. Steve faced a holographic projection of Picard, but twisted, a version of the captain advocating for absolute order, arguing that freedom must be sacrificed for security. Debate me, Captain Rogers. Convince me that your interventionist philosophy doesn't inevitably lead to tyranny. Tony found himself surrounded by broken technology, Federation devices, Klingon weapons, Romulan equipment, all damaged, all critical, all with people's lives depending on them being repaired. Save them all, Mr. Stark. But here's the catch, your arc reactor is failing. You have power for one repair. Choose. Thor stood before a doorway that rippled with rainbow light, the Bifrost, or a convincing simulation. Go home, God of Thunder. Walk through that door, and you'll return to your universe. But your friends will be trapped here forever. Or stay, and doom yourself to an alien galaxy. Choose. Natasha faced mirrors showing all the lives she'd taken, all the red in her ledger, amplified and reflected infinitely. A voice, her own, whispered from the shadows. You think you've changed. You think you're a hero. But we both know what you really are. Clint found himself on a precipice, his arrows scattered below, too far to reach. Below him, civilians, Enterprise crew members, hung from failing structural supports. He could save one before the others fell. Only one. Choose, Hawkeye. Who lives? Who dies? Make your shot count. Bruce stood in darkness, hearing only the Hulk's voice, feeling the transformation beginning. Let me out. You know they'll turn on us eventually. They always do. Let me out and we'll show them what happens to those who threaten us. And Picard stood separate from them all, forced to watch his new allies face impossible choices, knowing that whatever happened next would define not just them, but the Federation's relationship with beings of power. Q appeared beside him, munching on an apple that definitely hadn't been there a moment ago. Fascinating, isn't it? They're so used to solving problems with their fists and their fury. But these challenges? These require something more. Let's see if Earth's mightiest heroes are mighty in ways beyond mere muscle. End this, Q, Picard demanded. They've done nothing to deserve your games. Haven't they? Q replied, suddenly serious. They arrived in a universe with carefully maintained balance and immediately upset it. They fought Kardashians, allied with Klingon, demonstrated capabilities that will change the political landscape for centuries. Whether they deserve it or not, Jean-Luc, they've been noticed. By the continuum. By me. And now, they must prove they're worthy of the chaos they've created. In his section of the arena, Steve faced the twisted Picard projection, his mind racing. This was psychological warfare, and he'd endured it before, from Red Skull, from Hydra, from his own doubts during the dark days after the Sokovia Accords. He took a breath and spoke with the conviction that had made him a leader. "You're asking the wrong question," Steve said. "It's not about whether freedom can lead to tyranny. It's about whether the alternative, the absence of freedom, is acceptable. And it's not. Not ever. Not for any reason. Security without liberty is just another word for prison." The projection flickered, Q's test registering Steve's answer. Not right or wrong, there was no right answer, but authentic, unshakable, true to character. The challenges had begun. And whether they knew it or not, the Avengers were fighting for more than just themselves. They were fighting to prove that heroes could exist even in a universe that had evolved beyond the need for them. Tony stared at the array of damaged technology, his mind already calculating power requirements, repair sequences, and survival probabilities. Jarvis provided data overlays, each device connected to life support systems in different sections of ships, stations, and colonies. Hundreds of lives hung in the balance, and his arc reactor's failing energy signature pulsed a warning in his HUD. "Okay, Q, I get it," Tony said aloud. "Classic trolley problem. Force me to choose who lives and who dies, watch me agonize over it, prove that even genius billionaire playboy philanthropists have limits." He knelt beside the nearest device, a Romulan life support regulator. "But here's what you didn't account for." His fingers flew across the alien technology, adapting his arc reactor's output not to power one device, but to create a cascading energy distribution network. He cannibalized parts from non-critical systems, rerouting power through improvised circuits that shouldn't work but did because Tony Stark didn't accept limitations as permanent conditions. "I don't choose," Tony declared, connecting the final circuit. "I changed the equation." The network hummed to life, drawing minimal power from his arc reactor but amplifying it through the interconnected devices themselves. It was inefficient, jury-rigged, and wouldn't last more than a few hours, but it didn't need to. It just needed to work long enough for proper repairs. Q appeared beside him, genuinely surprised. "Well, that's actually clever. And completely misses the point of the exercise." "The point was to make me feel helpless," Tony replied, standing. "Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. In a cave in Afghanistan, with a box of scraps. You want to test me? Test me with an actual challenge, not Philosophy 101. In her section, Natasha stood before the mirrors, her reflection multiplying infinitely. Each one showed a different kill, a different mission, a different moment when she'd been the weapon rather than the wielder. The whispers grew louder, her own voice, mocking and cruel. "You're right," Natasha said quietly, addressing her reflections. "I know exactly what I am. I'm an assassin trained from childhood to kill without hesitation. I've done terrible things. I have read in my ledger that will never wash clean." The reflections smiled, thinking they'd won. "But," Natasha continued, her voice strengthening, "I'm also more than my past. I'm an Avenger. I've saved lives, protected innocence, stood between the world and threats they couldn't see coming. You want me to feel guilty? Fine. I carry that guilt every day. It's what reminds me why I fight now. Why I choose to be better than what they made me." She walked toward the mirrors, and instead of shattering them, she walked through them. The reflections dissolved like smoke. Q's test hadn't accounted for someone who'd already faced her demons and learned to coexist with them. Clint stood on his precipice, looking down at the impossible choice. His arrows were too far. The civilians were falling. He had seconds to decide. Every instinct screamed at him to choose, to act, to make the shot that would save at least one life. Instead, he jumped. He plummeted toward the falling civilians, trusting his acrobatic training, his years of impossible stunts and last-second saves. He caught the nearest person mid-fall, used his momentum to swing toward another, caught them with his legs, twisted in mid-air to grab a third with his free hand. He couldn't save them all. Physics and anatomy had limits even in Q's manufactured scenario. But he could save more than one. They slammed into a holographic safety net that Q materialized at the last second, preventing actual deaths. Clint rolled to his feet, breathing hard. 3 civilians saved instead of the predicted one. Not bad, Q observed, appearing in a flash of light. Though you failed to save 4 of them. How does that feel? Like I saved 3 people who'd be dead if I'd followed your rules, Clint replied, retrieving his arrows from the holographic ground below. You set up a test with 1 right answer. I gave you a different answer. If that's failure, I'll take it. Bruce stood in darkness, the Hulk's voice growing louder in his mind. The transformation was already beginning, green spreading across his skin, muscles expanding, rational thought giving way to primal fury. Every word Q's challenge whispered was designed to push him over the edge, to prove that Bruce Banner was just one trigger away from losing control. But Bruce had spent years learning to control the Hulk. He'd mastered techniques in Sakaar, gained understanding on Vormir, achieved synthesis during the blip. The relationship between Banner and Hulk wasn't adversarial anymore, it was collaborative. You're right, Bruce said to the voice. They might turn on us. People fear what they don't understand, and a giant green rage monster is pretty hard to understand. He closed his eyes, focusing on his breathing. But that's not a reason to give up on them. That's a reason to show them we can be trusted. That we can be more than our worst impulses. The transformation stopped mid-process. Bruce stood half-changed, green-skinned, enlarged, but still clearly Banner in consciousness and control. Q's test had tried to force a binary choice, Banner or Hulk. Bruce had chosen both. Thor stood before the Bifrost's rainbow light, Mjolnir heavy in his hand. Every instinct screamed at him to walk through, to return to Asgard, to resume his duties as prince and protector. His friends could find another way home, they were resourceful, capable. He didn't owe them his exile. Except he did. A clever illusion, Thor said, not moving toward the doorway. But false in its premise. You assume I wish to abandon my companions. That I value my own return over their welfare. You do not understand Asgardian honor if you believe that. He turned his back on the Bifrost. I am Thor Odinson, son of Odin, prince of Asgard. I have fought beside these warriors. I have bled beside them. I have watched them face impossible odds and emerge victorious through unity and trust. To abandon them now would be to abandon everything that makes me worthy of Mjolnir's power. The rainbow light flickered and died. The doorway dissolved. Thor had passed the test not by making the hard choice, but by recognizing that for him, it wasn't hard at all. Steve continued his debate with the twisted Picard projection, each argument and counterargument peeling away layers of political philosophy. But as he spoke about freedom and responsibility, about the dangers of authoritarianism even in benevolent forms, he realized something. You're not testing whether I can defend my principles, Steve said. You're testing whether I can understand opposing principles. Whether I'm so rigid in my beliefs that I can't see merit in other perspectives. The projection smiled, a real smile now, Picard's actual warmth showing through. Very good, Captain Rogers. So I'll say this, Steve continued. The Federation's approach has merit. The Prime Directive prevents cultural contamination and respects autonomy. Your commitment to diplomacy has likely prevented countless wars. My way isn't always right. But neither is yours. The truth is probably somewhere in between, knowing when to act and when to observe. When to fight and when to negotiate. The projection dissolved, leaving Steve alone. He'd passed not by winning the argument, but by acknowledging that absolute certainty was itself a form of blindness. The arena reassembled. The Avengers found themselves standing together again, with Picard beside them and Q hovering above, his expression uncharacteristically thoughtful. "Well," Q said finally. "That was unexpected. I designed each challenge to break you. To prove that power without wisdom is dangerous, that action without contemplation is destructive. But you six," he snapped his fingers, and the arena returned to normal. "You're more complicated than I anticipated. We've faced gods, Q," Tony said. "We've faced beings who thought they knew what was best for the universe. We've learned that absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that the only check against it is people willing to stand up and say, no, so if your test was supposed to prove we're dangerous. Sure. We're dangerous. So are you. So is anyone with the power to change the world. The question isn't whether power is dangerous. It's what you do with it." Q studied Tony for a long moment, then turned to Picard. "Jean-Luc, I'm beginning to understand why you tolerate humans. They're infuriatingly persistent." He looked back at the Avengers. "You want to know the real reason I'm here? The continuum is concerned. Your presence in this universe is creating ripples, temporal anomalies, dimensional instabilities, probability cascades. You're changing things just by existing. And that concerns beings who prefer reality to remain orderly. So send us home," Steve said simply. "Help us find our way back to our universe, and your problem is solved." "Is it?" Q replied. "Because I've looked at your timeline, Captain Rogers. I've seen what you're returning to. Thanos. The Infinity Stones. Extinction-level stakes. Do you really want to go back to that? Here, you could be gods. Here, you could reshape entire civilizations. The Kardashians would fall before you. The Borg would learn to fear. The entire quadrant would kneel." "We don't want them to kneel," Steve replied firmly. "We want to go home and finish what we started. That's all we've ever wanted." Q sighed dramatically. "Fine. Ruin my fun. But before I help you, and yes, I'm going to help you, because watching you fumble around trying to generate a dimensional portal with Federation technology would take decades and I'm bored now, I need you to understand something." He snapped his fingers, and suddenly they were floating in space, looking down at dozens of planets, hundreds of species, thousands of potential futures branching from this single moment. "Your fight with the Kardashians has already changed things," Q explained, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "The Romulans are accelerating weapons research to counter potential super-soldier programs. The Klingon are debating whether to seek alliance or test themselves against you. The Ferengi are calculating the profit margins on technology reverse-engineered from Iron Man's armor. And the Borg," the image shifted to show a massive cube, its drones beginning to adapt. "The Borg have taken notice of your unique biological and technological distinctiveness." "You're saying we've made things worse," Natasha observed. "I'm saying you've made things different," Q corrected. "Whether that's worse, better, or just more interesting remains to be seen. But if I send you home, these ripples remain. The Federation will spend the next century dealing with the consequences of 6 beings who appeared, demonstrated impossible power, and vanished. What do you suggest?" Picard asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Containment," Q replied. "I can send the Avengers home, that part's easy. But I need to adjust the timeline. Make it so their arrival was less spectacular. Fewer witnesses. Classified encounter. Known only to the Enterprise crew and sealed in Starfleet records that won't be declassified for a century." "You want to rewrite history," Steve said, his tone disapproving. "I want to minimize the damage," Q countered. "Your universe needs you. But this universe needs to not know you existed. It's for the best, trust me. I'm omnipotent, I know these things." "And what about the people we met?" Tony demanded. "The refugees we saved? Koth and the Klingon? Do they just forget us? They remember a skirmish with the Kardashians. They remember Picard's crew acting with honor. But the specifics, the armor, the hammer, the giant green physicist, those memories fade like a half-remembered dream. Everyone goes back to normal. Bruce, still partially transformed, spoke up. What about us? Do we remember this? Of course, Q said. You're dimensional anomalies. You exist outside this timeline. You'll remember everything, the Enterprise, the battles, the friends you made. But when you return home, it'll be as if no time has passed. You'll be right back in the fight against Thanos, with all your experiences here but none of the temporal displacement issues. The Avengers exchanged glances. It was everything they'd wanted, a way home, a chance to resume their mission, the knowledge that their actions here wouldn't destabilize an entire galaxy. But it also meant erasing their impact, making their time in the Star Trek universe effectively irrelevant to anyone but themselves. There's something you're not telling us, Natasha said, her spy's instincts reading Q's body language despite his omnipotence. What's the catch? Q smiled. The catch, Ms. Romanoff, is that this decision isn't mine alone. The Continuum has authorized me to make this offer. But you have to choose. Stay here and deal with the consequences, the Borg attention, the political upheaval, the wars that might start because of you. Or go home and let me clean up the timeline, knowing that all the good you did here will be forgotten by everyone except Picard's crew. Some choice, Clint muttered. It's the only choice I can offer, Q replied. What's it going to be, Avengers? Heroes who reshape a galaxy, or ghosts who vanish into classified files? Thor looked at his companions. We came here by accident. We did what we could with honor and integrity. But our true battlefield lies elsewhere. I say we return to our realm and face our destiny there. Agreed, Tony said. Much as I'd love to tinker with Federation tech for a few decades, we've got a purple genocidal maniac to stop. One by one, the Avengers voiced their agreement. Even Bruce, who'd found a strange peace in this universe, nodded. Their mission had always been clear: protect Earth, stop Thanos, save their universe. This detour, however interesting, was still just that, a detour. Steve turned to Picard. Captain, it's been an honor. I'm sorry we couldn't stay long enough to do this properly. On the contrary, Captain Rogers, Picard replied, extending his hand. You've given us something invaluable, a reminder that principles must sometimes be defended with action, not just words. That the rules we've built, however well-intentioned, aren't always sufficient. The Enterprise crew will remember you, even if the galaxy doesn't. They shook hands, two captains, two philosophies, two universes meeting in mutual respect. Q clapped his hands together. Wonderful. Touching. Now, let's get you home before the Borg show up. Trust me, you don't want to be here when they arrive. Q, Picard said sharply, the Borg are coming here. When? Oh, about 3 days after the Avengers would have left anyway, Q replied airily. Don't worry, Jean-Luc. You'll handle them the way you always do, with that insufferable combination of diplomacy and stubbornness that makes you so entertaining. He turned back to the Avengers, his expression becoming serious once more. Are you ready? Once I do this, there's no coming back. Your universe and this one will be completely sealed from each other. We're ready, Steve confirmed. Q raised his hand, reality beginning to shimmer around the Avengers. But before the effect completed, Thor called out one last time. Picard. Worf. Warriors of the Enterprise. Though time may erase memory, honor transcends dimensions. May your voyages be filled with glory and your battles won with wisdom. Live long and prosper, Picard replied, raising his hand in the Vulcan salute. The last thing the Avengers saw was the Enterprise crew standing together, Data, Geordi, Worf, Troy, Crusher, and Picard, a family forged in the crucible of exploration and bound by principles that, while different from the Avengers, were no less noble. Then reality twisted, dimensions collapsed, and 6 heroes fell through the space between universes, returning home. The transition was violent. Where their arrival in the Star Trek universe had been relatively gentle, a slow materialization, disorientation, confusion, their return slammed them back into their reality with the force of a cosmic collision. The Avengers crashed onto the scorched battlefield where they'd last stood, their bodies remembering the combat they'd left behind even as their minds still processed the universe they'd departed. Thanos stood exactly where he'd been, or perhaps no time had passed at all. Q's manipulation of temporal mechanics meant that from the perspective of everyone in this universe, the Avengers had never left. They'd simply blinked, staggered, and continued fighting. But they had changed. Avengers. Steve's voice cut through the chaos, his tactical mind immediately reassessing the battlefield. Formation Delta 7. The others responded instantly, moving into positions that hadn't existed in their playbook before, a defensive pattern they'd learned from Worf's Klingon combat techniques, adapted for their unique abilities. Tony's armor deployed with new efficiency, modifications inspired by his brief study of Federation technology. Thor's lightning struck with more precision, the discipline of his combat with Koth still fresh in muscle memory. Bruce's transformation was controlled, deliberate, the synthesis he'd achieved in Q's challenge maintaining itself even back in his home universe. Thanos noticed the change immediately. His eyes narrowed as he studied his opponents, sensing something different about them. They moved with new coordination, new purpose, as if they'd trained together for years in the seconds he'd perceived them distracted. Curious, Thanos rumbled. You seem changed. More focused. As if you've gained wisdom in the span of a heartbeat. We've had time to think, Steve replied, his shield catching an energy blast meant for Natasha. About power. About responsibility. About what it means to stand against tyranny. The fight resumed with renewed intensity. But now, the Avengers fought differently. Tony's repulsor strikes targeted Thanos' armor joints with surgical precision, the same precision he'd used to disable Kardashian warships without killing their crews. Thor's combat style incorporated elements of Koth's technique, using momentum and positioning rather than relying solely on divine strength. Natasha and Clint executed maneuvers that accounted for three-dimensional combat in ways they'd learned during their spacewalk against alien vessels. Even Bruce, especially Bruce, fought with new understanding. The Hulk's rage was present but directed, channeled through Banner's intellect in a synthesis that made them stronger together than either could be alone. Whatever happened to you, Thanos growled, his infinity gauntlet blazing, it will not be enough. I am inevitable. And we, Steve declared, the entire team moving as one, are the Avengers. The battle raged across the ruined compound. Each Avenger drew on experiences from another universe, adapting principles they'd learned from Federation officers and Klingon warriors. Steve's debates with Picard had sharpened his strategic thinking, helping him see 3 moves ahead of Thanos' attacks. Tony's engineering challenges had refined his ability to improvise solutions under pressure. Thor's test of honor had reminded him that strength without wisdom was merely brutality. When Tony finally managed to seize the Infinity Stones, sacrificing himself as he'd always known he might, his last words carried weight earned across dimensions. I am Iron Man. The snap echoed across realities. Thanos and his army dissolved into dust. The battle was won, but at the ultimate cost. As Tony Stark's light faded, the surviving Avengers gathered around him, their grief compounded by the knowledge that he'd died having experienced wonders he could never share with anyone outside their team. He saved the universe, Natasha said quietly. Again. He saved 2 universes, Thor corrected, his voice heavy with sorrow. Though only we will ever know it. The funeral was attended by thousands, heroes, allies, and grateful civilians whose lives Tony had touched. As Pepper placed the Arc Reactor Memorial on the lake, Steve stood with the remaining Avengers, their shared secret a bond that would never break. In the days that followed, as the world began to rebuild, the 6 of them would occasionally gather, not for missions or planning, but simply to remember. They'd share stories about a starship called Enterprise, about a captain who believed in diplomacy, about Klingon who valued honor, and about an omnipotent entity who tested them and found them worthy. Bruce would explain Federation science to Tony's holographic AI, trying to reconcile two universes' physics. Thor would tell Asgardian children about honorable warriors from another realm who fought without magic or divine blood. Natasha and Clint would practice combat techniques learned from a Klingon security officer, incorporating them into SHIELD training protocols. And Steve would sometimes stand alone, looking at the stars, wondering if somewhere out there, in another universe, a starship was exploring strange new worlds, and if its captain remembered a soldier out of time who'd learned that heroism could take many forms. But in the Star Trek universe, things were not as Q had promised. The timeline alteration had worked, mostly. The Kardashians remembered a skirmish. The Klingon remembered a challenge. Most of the galaxy continued on as if 6 beings from another universe had never appeared. But Picard remembered. His entire senior staff remembered. And they'd been ordered by Starfleet Command to classify everything related to the dimensional anomaly incident under the highest security protocols. "It's for the best," Admiral Nechayev had said during the secure transmission. "The Romulan Tal Shiar is already investigating rumors. The Obsidian Order has filed formal complaints about unauthorized combatants. If word spreads that the Federation has access to beings with that kind of power." "We don't have access," Picard had interrupted. "They're gone. Q sent them home." "Then we maintain that fiction," Nechayev replied firmly. "Classified. Sealed. Forgotten." But some things couldn't be forgotten. In engineering, Geordi kept a PADD containing energy readings from Tony's arc reactor, impossible readings that suggested physics his universe couldn't explain but could study. In sickbay, Dr. Crusher maintained tissue samples from Captain Rogers and Dr. Banner, studying enhancement techniques that might one day save lives. In his quarters, Worf displayed the Batleth Koth had given him after the challenge, a mark of respect between warriors across dimensions. And in the ready room, Picard kept a data rod containing the complete sensor logs of the Avengers' arrival, their battles, and their departure. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it was evidence that the universe was far larger and more complex than even the Federation had imagined. 3 days after the Avengers departed, exactly as Q had predicted, a Borg cube entered Federation space. "Captain," data reported from Ops, "sensors detect a Borg vessel on approach vector. They are hailing us." On screen. The view screen filled with the image of a Borg drone, its cybernetic implants gleaming. But there was something unusual about its behavior, a hesitation, a calculation, as if the collective was uncertain. "We are the Borg," the drone announced. "You will be assimilated. Resistance is," it paused, processing. "We have detected residual energy signatures aboard your vessel. Dimensional variance. Biological distinctiveness. Technological distinctiveness. Unknown classification." Picard stood, understanding immediately what the Borg had sensed. "Those signatures are from an anomaly that has been resolved. The entities you detected are no longer present in this universe." "Negative. The signatures remain. We will assimilate them. We will add their distinctiveness to our own." "They're gone," Picard repeated firmly. "You're chasing ghosts." The Borg drone's head tilted, its collective consciousness analyzing. The Borg had perfect memory, perfect records. They detected something unprecedented, beings whose energy signatures suggested capabilities beyond current Borg parameters. The collective needed to assimilate this distinctiveness. But the beings were no longer present. The trail was cold. "We are the Borg," the drone said again, but with something that almost sounded like frustration, an impossibility for the collective, yet there nonetheless. "You have encountered beings of significant distinctiveness. This distinctiveness must be added to our perfection. Then you have a problem," Worf said from Tactical, his voice carrying grim satisfaction. "Because those beings exist in another universe entirely." Beyond your reach. Beyond even Q's reach, now that the dimensional barriers have been sealed. The Borg processed this information. For several long moments, the drones simply stared at them, the collective's vast intelligence calculating possibilities, strategies, alternatives. Finally, this is unacceptable. We will find them. We will adapt. Good luck with that, Geordi muttered from engineering. The Borg cube withdrew, returning to its own space. But Picard knew this wasn't over. The Borg never forgot. They would search for any trace of the Avengers, any pathway to that dimensional distinctiveness they'd briefly sensed. And they would never find it. In the months that followed, reports filtered in from across the quadrant. The Romulans had accelerated research into enhanced humanoid capabilities, attempting to recreate what their spies had observed. The Klingon honored Thor's name in battle songs, speaking of a warrior from beyond who'd fought with honor and vanished like a legend. The Kardashians filed diplomatic protests about Federation superweapons, claims that Picard's crew had to repeatedly deny. The Ferengi tried to profit off action figures depicting the mysterious warriors, until Starfleet legal forced them to stop. And throughout it all, the Enterprise continued its mission. Exploring. Discovering. Maintaining the principles that had defined the Federation for centuries. But Picard's crew was changed. They'd seen what was possible when power met purpose, when strength was tempered by principle. They'd witnessed 6 individuals from another universe demonstrate that sometimes, rules had to bend, or break, to do what was right. Do you think we'll ever see them again? Troy asked Picard one evening, as they stood in 10 forward, looking out at the stars. No, Picard replied honestly. Q sealed the dimensional barriers. And even if he hadn't, I suspect the Avengers have their own battles to fight. Their own universe to protect. But they changed us, Troy observed. Whether the galaxy knows it or not. Yes, Picard agreed. They reminded us that for all our principles, all our protocols, sometimes the most important thing is simply to stand up and fight for what's right. Not because it's diplomatic. Not because it's strategically sound. But because it's right. He raised his glass of Earl Grey in a silent toast to 6 warriors from another Earth, another universe, another reality entirely. Live long and prosper, he whispered. Wherever you are. On Earth, the Avengers' Earth, Steve Rogers stood in his apartment, unable to sleep. The grief of losing Tony was still fresh, the weight of everything they'd endured still heavy. But mixed with the sorrow was something else, gratitude. He pulled out a small object he'd managed to keep despite Q's reality manipulation, a combadge, Starfleet insignia gleaming in the dim light. It shouldn't exist. By all rights, Q's timeline alteration should have erased it. But somehow, Steve had held onto it, a physical reminder that their journey hadn't been a dream. His phone buzzed. A group message from Natasha. Can't sleep either. One by one, the other Avengers responded. Thor from New Asgard. Bruce from his lab. Clint from his farm. Even a pre-recorded message from Tony's AI, programmed to activate if certain keywords were detected in their communications. You're thinking about it too, Tony's hologram said, his smile bittersweet. The Enterprise. Picard. The whole weird interdimensional field trip. Good. Don't forget it. We saw something important there, a future where humanity grew beyond its worst impulses. Where exploration mattered more than conquest. Where diplomacy actually worked most of the time. 2 years had passed since the Avengers returned from their interdimensional journey. 2 years since Tony's sacrifice. 2 years of rebuilding a world that had lost half its population, regained it, and struggled to find equilibrium in the aftermath. Steve Rogers had passed Captain America's shield to Sam Wilson, finally accepting that some battles belonged to the next generation. But retirement hadn't brought peace, it had brought reflection. And in reflecting on everything he'd experienced, he kept returning to those days aboard the Enterprise. He stood now in the Smithsonian, watching families move through the Captain America exhibit. Children stared wide-eyed at his old uniform, at the shield behind protective glass, at the plaques describing battles against Hydrae, Ultron, Thanos. But there was no mention of Kardashians. No record of Klingon honor challenges. No acknowledgement of a starship captain who taught him that heroism could exist without superhuman abilities. Quite a legacy, came a voice beside him, female, measured, carrying an accent that didn't quite fit any terrestrial origin. Steve turned to find a woman he didn't recognize. She wore civilian clothes, but something about her bearing suggested military training. Her eyes held knowledge that seemed impossible for someone who looked barely 30. "I'm sorry," Steve said. "Do I know you?" "No," she replied. "But I know you, Captain Rogers. Or rather, I know of you. From stories my mother told me. Stories about warriors from another universe who appeared on her ship when she was just a child. Warriors who saved her life." Steve's breath caught. "That's impossible." Q erased the timeline. Only Picard's crew was supposed to remember. "My mother was Sarah," the woman continued. "One of the 3 Vistari refugees you rescued from the Kardashians. She was unconscious during most of your time aboard the Enterprise, but she remembered fragments. Images. A man with a star on his chest. A woman with red hair who spoke kindly to her. A giant who turned green. She pulled out a small device, not Federation technology, but something close. A data storage unit. Before she died, my mother asked me to deliver this. She said if the warriors from another universe ever returned to their home, they deserved to know what happened after they left." Steve accepted the device, his hands trembling slightly. "How did you find me?" "I'm an archaeologist," the woman explained. "Specializing in temporal anomalies and cross-dimensional events. I've spent years researching the classified incident aboard the Enterprise. Years tracking energy signatures, interviewing witnesses, analyzing data that Starfleet thought they'd buried. And I found patterns, quantum echoes that suggested exactly when and where your universe intersected with mine." "You traveled across dimensions?" Steve asked, incredulous. "Briefly. The barriers are sealed, as Q promised. But they're not perfect. Small objects can sometimes slip through, information, data, messages. I piggybacked on one of those rifts, manifested a temporal avatar in your reality. I have perhaps 10 minutes before the universe corrects the imbalance and pulls me back." She gestured to the device. "It contains recordings. Testimony from those who were affected by your presence. My mother, Commander Koth, even Captain Picard himself, recorded 50 years after your departure. They wanted you to know that despite Q's alterations, despite the classified records, your actions mattered. They changed lives. They changed history." Steve activated the device. A hologram materialized, not Tony's technology, but something more advanced, more refined. Sarah's face appeared, older now, weathered by decades but still recognizable as the frightened child in sickbay. "Captain Rogers," the recording began, Sarah's voice strong despite her age. "I don't know if you'll ever see this. I don't know if dimensional barriers can truly be crossed by something as simple as a message. But I had to try." She smiled, tears visible in her eyes. "You saved my life. You and your team risked everything to protect 3 strangers from a fate we couldn't escape on our own. After you left, my family was granted asylum on Earth, your Earth, in our universe. We built a life there. I became a teacher. My brother became an engineer. We had families, careers, long lives made possible because 6 heroes from another universe refused to accept that we weren't worth saving." The image shifted to show a classroom, children of various species learning together, human and Vulcan and Andorian, the diversity that defined the Federation. "This is my classroom," Sarah continued. "I teach history. And I always tell my students about the principle that guides the Federation, that every life has value, that every being deserves a chance at freedom and dignity. I tell them about the Prime Directive, about non-interference, about all the careful rules we've built. But I also tell them, off the record, of course, about warriors who came from another universe and broke those rules to do what was right. Who showed us that sometimes, principles must be defended with action. Another shift. Now Commander Koth appeared, older, scarred from decades of battles, but still carrying himself with warrior's pride. Thor Odinson, Koth rumbled, respect evident in his voice. I have fought many battles since our challenge. I have commanded fleets, conquered enemies, earned glory across the empire. But no victory has meant more to me than that honorable combat we shared. You taught me that honor exists in forms beyond Klingon tradition. That strength can be tempered with wisdom. That a true warrior knows when to extend mercy. He raised a batleth, the same one he'd given Worf. This blade has been passed down through my house. My sons carry it now, and they will teach their sons about the Thunder God who fought with honor and vanished into legend. Your name is spoken in Klingon battle halls, Odinson. You are remembered. The images continued. Geordi LaForge, now an admiral, discussing how studying Tony's arc reactor had led to breakthroughs in sustainable energy. Dr. Crusher explaining how tissue samples from Captain Rogers had advanced medical treatments for genetic disorders. Data, somehow still functional centuries after his designed obsolescence, calculating the probability that the Avengers' presence had accelerated Federation technological progress by approximately 4.7 decades. Finally, Captain Jean-Luc Picard appeared. He was ancient now, well past 100, his body frail but his mind clearly sharp. He sat in a study filled with artifacts from his career, Klingon weapons, Romulan art, Borg implants deactivated and preserved. Captain Rogers. Mr. Stark. Dr. Banner. Mr. Barton. Ms. Romanoff. Thor. Picard's voice was softer with age, but no less commanding. If you are viewing this, then the improbable has occurred, communication across dimensional barriers, however brief. I wanted you to know that your time aboard the Enterprise, though brief, left an indelible mark. He gestured to a shelf where Steve's combadge sat, not the one Steve had kept, but its twin from the Star Trek universe. You reminded us that the principles we hold dear are not abstract philosophies. They are living commitments that must sometimes be defended with more than words. You showed us that power, properly directed, can be a force for liberation rather than oppression. Picard's expression grew somber. I won't pretend the aftermath was simple. The Borg spent decades searching for traces of your energy signatures. The Romulans accelerated weapons programs. The Kardashian Union filed formal protests that strained diplomatic relations. But we endured. We adapted. And we grew stronger for having known you. He leaned forward, his eyes seeming to look directly at Steve despite the recording being decades old. In my career, I've encountered beings of immense power, Q, the Borg Collective, entities from beyond our dimension. Most wielded their power carelessly or cruelly. But you six, you wielded yours with purpose and restraint. You fought only when necessary. You protected the innocent. You upheld principles even when they conflicted with expedience. A slight smile crossed his aged features. That is the mark of true heroes. Not the power you possess, but the wisdom with which you use it. The Federation has faced many challenges since your departure. We've fought wars, negotiated peace, explored new frontiers. Through it all, your example has guided us. When faced with impossible choices, I've often asked myself, what would Captain Rogers do? What would the Avengers do? Picard raised his hand in the Vulcan salute one final time. Live long and prosper, my friends. And know that across dimensional barriers, across the vast gulfs between universes, you are remembered. You are honored. You are missed. The hologram faded. Steve stood in the Smithsonian, tears streaming down his face, as Sarah's descendant watched with quiet compassion. "They never forgot," she said softly. "Despite Q's manipulations, despite the classified records, the truth endured. You changed my universe, Captain Rogers. For the better." "What about the Borg?" Steve asked, his tactical mind immediately going to threats. Picard said they were searching. "They never found you," she assured him. "The dimensional barriers held. Eventually, even the Borg concluded that assimilating your distinctiveness was impossible and allocated resources elsewhere. The galaxy survived. Thrived, even. But we never stopped wondering about the warriors who appeared, saved lives, and vanished like legends." She began to fade, her temporal avatar reaching its limit. "I have to go. The universe is correcting the imbalance. But before I do, thank you. On behalf of my mother, my family, everyone whose lives you touched. Thank you for showing us that heroism transcends dimensions." "Wait," Steve called out. "What's your name?" "Tala," she replied, smiling. "Named after my grandmother. The woman you saved." Her form shimmered, quantum instability making her transparent. "One last thing," Captain Picard left instructions in his will. "If contact was ever established with your universe, I was to tell you something." "What?" He said, "The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, but never forget that the few matter too. You understood that. Never lose that understanding." She vanished, pulled back across dimensional barriers to her own universe. Steve stood alone in the Smithsonian, clutching the data device, his heart full of emotions he couldn't name. That evening, he gathered the surviving Avengers, those who remained, those who'd shared the journey. They met at the lake where Tony's memorial stood, where the arc reactor glowed with eternal light. Steve played the recordings. They watched together in silence as their impact across universes was revealed. Thor wept openly at Koth's tribute. Bruce smiled at Data's analysis of their dimensional variants. Clint and Natasha exchanged glances when Crusher mentioned how their combat techniques had influenced Starfleet security protocols. When Picard's final message played, they all stood, unconsciously coming to attention as the old captain offered his farewell across impossible distances. "We made a difference," Natasha said quietly when it ended. "Even after we left. Even when most of the galaxy forgot. We mattered." "We always matter," Thor replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Every battle, every choice, every life saved. It all matters." Koth understood that. Picard understood that. And now, finally, we understand it too. Bruce looked at the arc reactor memorial. Tony would have loved this. Knowing his technology-inspired breakthroughs in another universe. That his sacrifice meant something beyond what we could see. He knew, Steve said with certainty. Somehow, Tony always knew that what we did mattered. That the work of heroes never truly ends. It just continues. In ways we can't always predict or measure. They stood together as the sun set, 6 warriors, 5 now, with Tony's memory standing eternal, who'd fought across dimensions and learned that heroism wore many faces. That wisdom could be as powerful as strength. That sometimes, the most important battles weren't won with fists or technology, but with the simple refusal to abandon those in need. To absent friends, Clint said, raising a flask. To new friends across impossible distances, Natasha added. To honor that transcends universes, Thor declared. To the belief that we can be better, Bruce offered. To the future, Steve concluded. The one Tony believed in. The one Picard built. The one where humanity, all humanity, in every universe, reaches for the stars and finds not conquest, but understanding. They drank, they remembered, and they promised silently to carry forward the lessons learned aboard a starship called Enterprise. Years later, when Sam Wilson asked Steve about the mysterious comm badge he kept in a secure box, Steve simply smiled. A reminder, he said. That heroes exist in forms we never expect. That sometimes, the greatest battles are fought not for glory or victory, but simply because it's right. And that somewhere, in another universe we'll never see again, there are people who remember us. Who honor us. Who carry forward the principles we fought to defend. Sounds like a story, Sam observed. It is, Steve agreed. The best kind. The kind where warriors from different worlds, different philosophies, different universes entirely, found common ground in the simple belief that every life has value. That freedom is worth fighting for. That the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak. He handed Sam the comm badge. Keep this. Pass it down. Make sure future Avengers know that our mission doesn't end with our lifetimes. That somewhere, across barriers we can't cross, allies will never see again remember what we stood for. And that matters. It will always matter. Sam accepted the comm badge with reverence, understanding that he held more than technology. He held a bridge between universes, a symbol of heroism that transcended reality itself. And in another universe, aboard a new Enterprise with a new crew facing new challenges, a young captain reviewed classified files from centuries past. She read about dimensional anomalies, about warriors from another Earth, about principles tested and upheld across impossible circumstances. She closed the file and looked out at the stars, at the infinite possibilities waiting to be explored. Computer, she said, add a note to personal log. Subject, the Avengers Initiative. Ready, the computer replied. They came from another universe. They saved lives. They challenged our assumptions. And then they left, trusting us to build a future worthy of their sacrifice. I think, she paused, choosing her words carefully. I think that's what Starfleet is really about. Not exploring for our own sake, but building something worth exploring for. Something worth defending. Something that heroes from any universe would recognize as good and true. She stood, straightening her uniform. End log. And remind me, if we ever detect another dimensional anomaly, we approach with open minds and open hearts. Because if the Avengers taught us anything, it's that the impossible is just the possible we haven't figured out yet. The Enterprise warped away, carrying the torch of exploration forward, honoring the legacy of warriors from another universe who'd proven that heroism, in any reality, meant standing up when others couldn't. Protecting those who needed protection. And never, ever accepting that the rules mattered more than the lives those rules were meant to serve. Across dimensions, across universes, across the infinite possibilities of existence itself, two philosophies had met and found synthesis. Action and wisdom. Strength and diplomacy. Heroes and explorers. The Avengers and the Federation. And though dimensional barriers kept them forever separate, the principles they shared would endure, eternal as the stars themselves. The Avengers' journey through the Star Trek universe became legend in both realities, one remembered in classified files and whispered stories, the other carried in the hearts of warriors who'd learned that heroism transcends dimensions. In the Marvel Universe, the comm badge passed from Sam Wilson to the next generation of Avengers, a reminder that their mission extended beyond their world, their universe, their comprehension. That somewhere, allies they'd never see again remembered their sacrifice and honored their principles. In the Star Trek universe, Picard's crew kept their secret, but the impact rippled outward regardless. The Federation grew stronger, not through the acquisition of power, but through the reminder that power must serve purpose. That principles without action are merely philosophy, but action without principles is chaos. Thor returned to New Asgard with stories of honorable warriors who fought without magic. Natasha and Clint trained S.H.I.E.L.D. agents in techniques learned from a Klingon security officer. Bruce continued his research, forever changed by his time aboard a ship where science and exploration mattered more than weapons and war. And Steve Rogers lived out his days knowing that in another universe, an old captain had once told him that the measure of a civilization wasn't its technology or territory, it was how it treated the powerless when no one was watching. Both universes were changed, subtly but irreversibly. The Avengers learned that strength must be tempered with wisdom. The Federation learned that sometimes, rules must bend to serve justice. And across dimensional barriers that would never again be crossed, two philosophies found harmony. Perhaps Q had been right after all. Perhaps the real test wasn't about power versus diplomacy, action versus contemplation, heroes versus explorers. Perhaps it was about recognizing that all of these seemingly opposed forces were actually complementary, two sides of the same commitment to making the universe better, one life at a time. The Avengers assembled to protect Earth. The Federation assembled to explore space. But in the end, both stood for the same fundamental truth, that every being, regardless of origin or capability, deserves dignity, freedom, and the chance to reach for something greater than themselves.